successful, composed, wearing a designer suit I'd bought with my own money. Julia Emerson, founder of MindBridge, invited keynote speaker at the EdTech Innovation Summit. Not Julia Stanton. Never again, Julia Stanton. "Mom, you're doing that thing with your ring again," Mira said beside me, her 12-year-old voice carrying that mix of concern and gentle teasing only daughters master. I looked down. Sure enough, I was twisting the simple silver band on my right hand. Not a wedding ring, just armor. "Sorry, baby, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've checked the speaker list 17 times since breakfast." She pushed her glasses up her nose, a gesture so achingly familiar it made my chest tight. Those weren't my eyes behind those lenses. They were his. Richard Stanton, CEO of Stanton Tech. Closing keynote speaker. I'd known he would be here when I accepted the invitation. Part of me, the stupid, reckless part that still woke up sometimes expecting to find him beside me, had accepted because of it. 12 years. 12 years since I'd signed those papers with shaking hands. 12 years since I'd walked out of his lawyer's office with nothing but the clothes on my back and a baby growing inside me. "We don't have to go in," Mira said quietly. "We could just get pizza instead. There's that place you mentioned, Prince Street." I looked at my daughter, brilliant, kind, everything he'd never wanted her to be, and found my spine. "No, we're here to talk about how MindBridge helps kids like you. That's what matters." But as we walked through those doors, my body remembered things my mind had tried to forget. The scent of his cologne at galas like this. The weight of his hand on my lower back, possessive and cold. The way he'd smile for cameras while whispering cutting remarks about my dress, my laugh, my inability to play the corporate wife correctly. The ballroom was already filling. Tech executives in $1,000 sneakers mingled with educators in sensible shoes. I guided Mira toward the registration table, keeping my head down, just another face in the crowd. Julia Emerson?" I froze. Not his voice. Richard would never sound so uncertain. I turned to find a woman in her 50s, perfectly styled in that Manhattan way. "I'm sorry, She paused, studying my face. "You look familiar. Have we met?" "I don't think so." The lie came smooth as silk. I recognized her, too. Patricia Holloway, Stanton Tech's CFO. She'd been at our wedding. She'd sent flowers when Richard's father died. She'd stood silent in that boardroom when Richard announced our divorce. Her eyes flickered to Mira, and I saw the exact moment recognition dawned. The slight widening of pupils, the quick glance at my daughter's distinctive eyes, the way her mouth opened slightly. I pulled Mira closer. "My mistake," Patricia said faintly. "You just reminded me of someone." She walked away quickly, already pulling out her phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a mistake. I should never have come. But Mira was already pulling me toward the exhibition hall, excited about the AR demonstration she'd helped code, oblivious to the bomb that had just been lit. 20 minutes. That's how long it took. 20 minutes of Mira explaining our adaptive learning algorithms to fascinated teachers. 20 minutes of me pretending my world wasn't about to implode. 20 minutes before I felt the air change. I turned, and there he was. Time folded in on itself. Suddenly, I wasn't 34, successful, strong. I was 22 again, watching Richard Stanton stride into my linguistics lab at Columbia, lost and irritated and beautiful. "Excuse me," he'd said, not really looking at me. "I'm looking for Professor Chen's advanced computing theory." "Wrong building," I'd replied, not looking up from my phonetic analysis. "You want Mudd Hall, North Campus." "You could look at me when you're talking." That made me look. Those eyes, sharp as winter sky, impatient, entitled. Everything I should have run from. "You could say please when you're asking for help." He'd smiled then, surprised. Richard Stanton wasn't used to being challenged. I should have known that smile was a warning. But I fell anyway. God help me, I fell hard. 6 months later, I was wearing his grandmother's ring. 2 years after that, I stood in a Vera Wang dress I couldn't breathe in, promising to love and honor a man I was only beginning to understand was more winter than warmth. The early years weren't all bad. That's what makes it worse, somehow. There were moments, Sunday mornings with coffee and the Times, surprise trips to Paris, the way he'd pull me close after board meetings and whisper, "Thank God you're here." I mistook need for love. I mistook possession for protection. The changes came slowly. a comment about my research taking too much time, a suggestion that I attend fewer conferences, a gentle insistence that Stanton Tech Wives didn't work. They supported, they hosted, they smiled. "It's not giving up your career," he'd said, hands on my shoulders. "It's choosing us." So I chose. I left Columbia 6 months before defending my dissertation. I learned to host dinners for 40. I perfected the art of small talk with venture capitalists. I became what he needed: beautiful, silent, there. The loneliness was crushing. Our penthouse felt like a museum, all glass and marble and echo. Richard worked 18-hour days building his empire. I rattled around in designer clothes, forgetting the sound of my own thoughts. Then came the gala. March 15th. I wore the emerald dress he'd picked. I laughed at the right jokes. I stood by his side as he announced Stanton Tech's IPO plans. The perfect wife, until I went looking for him during cocktails and found him in the coat room with Alexandra Chen, our corporate lawyer, her lipstick on his collar, his hand in her hair, the casual ease of familiar intimacy. I didn't make a scene. I'd learned better by then. I went back to the party. I smiled. I applauded his speech. I rode home beside him in silence, watching the city lights blur past. "You saw," he said finally. "Yes, it doesn't mean anything. It means everything." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Don't be dramatic, Julia. This is how the world works. I come home to you. Like I'm a house, a thing to come home to? Like you're my wife." He said it like it explained everything, like it excused everything. 2 weeks later, the nausea started. I threw up every morning, hiding it from him, from everyone. When the second line appeared on that test, I sat on our bathroom floor, Italian marble, cold as his eyes, and sobbed. I still remember the hope, fragile as spun glass, when I told him. Maybe a baby would change things. Maybe he'd remember why he'd married me. Maybe we'd be a family. "Get rid of it," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "The timing's wrong. The IPO. This is our child. This is a complication." He finally looked at me then, and I saw the truth clear as day. I wasn't his wife. I was an asset. And assets that became liabilities were disposed of. The papers were drawn up within a week. Sign, or he'd destroy me. Sign, and I'd get enough to disappear quietly. Sign, and never contact him again. I signed with my daughter's heartbeat fluttering inside me, strong and stubborn already. The Greyhound to Albuquerque smelled like desperation and industrial cleaner. I counted the cash in my wallet again, $2,000, everything I'd managed to hide. My wedding ring would have brought more, but I'd left it on his pillow like the cliché I'd become. The first motel asked for ID. When they ran my credit card, it was declined. Then another, and another. Richard's reach was long and precise. Julia Stanton had been erased. "Please," I begged the night clerk at a rundown place off Central Avenue. "I can pay cash. Just one night." She looked at my designer clothes, my swollen eyes, my hand pressed protective over my still flat stomach. "Honey, you running from someone?" "Yes." "He hit you?" "Not with his fists." She slid a key across the counter. "Room 106. First week's on the house. After that, you better figure something out." Maria Gonzalez saved my life that night, though she'd never take credit for it. She owned the Sunrise Motel, a place where people came to disappear or die, and somehow she decided I was worth saving. The room was clean but tired. Faded floral bedspread, water stains on the ceiling, a window that looked out on the parking lot. I sat on the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. No bank accounts. Frozen. No credit cards. Canceled. My phone disconnected. My email bounced back. Julia Stanton had vanished, and Julia Emerson didn't exist yet. Those first weeks blurred together. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Job applications rejected the moment they ran my social. Pawn shops that offered pennies for my designer bags. I lived on packaged ramen and tap water, threw up more than I kept down, and talked to the baby just to hear a voice. "We're going to be okay," I'd whisper, hand on my growing bump. "I don't know how, but we're going to be okay." Maria found me passed out in the parking lot one August afternoon, dehydrated and dizzy. She dragged me to her apartment behind the office, forced Gatorade down my throat, and put me to work. "You can clean rooms for cash," she said. "Under the table. But you gotta eat, Mama. That baby needs you strong." So I cleaned. Motel rooms that had seen too much life, too much despair. I scrubbed and swept and learned that dignity wasn't something anyone could take. You had to give it away. And I refused. Evenings, I haunted the public library, using their computers to take free online courses, coding, digital marketing, AI, and language processing. My dissertation might be dead, but my brain wasn't. Not yet. The other motel residents avoided me at first. The pregnant woman with soft hands and harder eyes. But slowly, they accepted me, taught me things, where to get day-old bread, which churches served meals without sermons, how to make $5 stretch for 3 days. When I started showing, really showing, the looks began. Grocery store clerks who assumed I was a teenager, bus drivers who wouldn't meet my eyes. Good Christian women who whispered about those kinds of girls. "You got family?" Maria asked one night, watching me fold laundry with swollen fingers. "No, the father, gone. Men ain't shit," she said matter-of-factly. "But babies are hope with heartbeats." She was right. Every kick, every flutter, every 3 a.m. dance party in my belly reminded me why I was fighting. Not for me, for her. I went into labor alone on a Tuesday night in December. Maria drove me to the hospital in her ancient Corolla, cursing in Spanish at every red light. 16 hours later, Mira arrived. 5 pounds, 2 ounces of pure stubbornness. "She's small," the nurse said, worried. "We'll need to monitor her." But when they placed her on my chest, when those eyes, his eyes, damn it, looked up at me, I knew. Small didn't mean weak. It just meant she'd have to fight harder, just like her mother. Mira was 3 when I realized she couldn't read like other kids. "The letters danced," she said. "They played tricks." The teacher at her preschool suggested testing, spoke gently about learning differences, handed me pamphlets I couldn't afford to implement. That night, I held my brilliant, frustrated daughter as she cried over a simple picture book. "I'm stupid, Mama. The words are mean to me." "No, baby, your brain just works differently, like a computer that needs different software." The idea hit me at 2 a.m., Mira finally asleep beside me in our tiny apartment. What if I could build that software? What if I could make the words stop dancing? I started simple. Color coding, animation, voice integration. Using my old linguistics knowledge and new coding skills, I built crude programs on a secondhand laptop Maria had found. Mira was my beta tester, my co-designer, my reason. "Make the bee blue, Mama. It feels blue." The story needs to move slower here. My brain gets tired. Within 6 months, she was reading. Not just reading, devouring books, writing stories, teaching other kids at the library's reading program. Word spread the way it does in communities like ours. Soon, I had a dozen kids crowding into our apartment, learning on my janky laptop. "You should enter this," said Janet Chen, the librarian who'd become my friend. She showed me a flyer. Southwest Women Entrepreneurs Competition. First prize, $50,000. "I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just a mom with a computer." "Same thing, honey." The application asked for a business plan. I didn't have one. I had a mission statement. Every child deserves to learn in the way their brain works best. The rest, I figured out as I went. Standing in front of those judges, real entrepreneurs, people with MBAs and connections, I felt like a fraud. But then I thought of Mira, of all the kids who'd been told they were stupid, lazy, not trying hard enough. "MindBridge isn't just software," I said. "It's a promise that we won't leave any child behind because their brain processes differently." They gave me the money. More importantly, they gave me credibility. The growth was organic, viral in the way only parent networks can be. One success story shared at school pickup became 10. 10 became 100. Rural schools with no special education budgets bought licenses. Parents homeschooling kids with dyslexia, ADHD, autism, they found us. Mira remained my North Star. Now 8, she'd moved from user to consultant, sitting in on development meetings, testing new features, advocating fiercely for accessibility. "The font's too fancy," she'd declare. "Kyle won't be able to track it. We need a pause button here. Sometimes brains need to rest." By her 10th birthday, MindBridge had helped 100,000 kids. We'd moved to Austin for the tech scene, rented a real house with a yard. I'd hired a team, we had investors calling. But I protected our privacy fiercely. Emerson was my grandmother's maiden name. Our origin story stayed vague. Single mom makes good. No details about the father. No traces leading back to New York, to Stanton Tech, to the woman I'd been. I legally changed Mira's last name when she started school, sealed her birth certificate, scrubbed our digital footprint. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Richard had made clear what happened to inconveniences. "Why don't I have a dad?" Mira asked one night, working on a family tree project. "You do. He just couldn't be part of our lives." "Did he die?" "No, baby. He made choices, and we made better ones." She accepted that with the practical wisdom of a child who'd never known different. We were complete, she and I. We didn't need anyone else. Except now, standing in this New York ballroom, watching Richard's face cycle through shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like pain, I realized I'd been naive. You can't outrun the past. You can only choose how to face it when it finally catches up. His approach was a CEO's approach. Direct, purposeful, cutting through the crowd like they were stock prices to be ignored. I positioned myself between him and Mira, who was still explaining neural pathways to a fascinated teacher. "Julia," just my name, but waited with 12 years of silence. "Richard." I kept my voice professional, aware of the eyes turning our way. "I didn't realize you were interested in educational technology." "I'm interested in many things." His gaze flicked to Mira, back to me, including impossible coincidences. "Mom?" Mira had noticed the tension, turning with that protective instinct she'd inherited from somewhere. "Everything okay?" "Fine, baby. Why don't you go check out the VR station? I'll catch up." She hesitated, looking between us with those analytical eyes. His eyes. Then she nodded and moved away, throwing one last glance over her shoulder. "She's beautiful," Richard said quietly. "Don't." "How old?" "Don't do this here." 12? His voice was perfectly controlled, but I knew him, knew the tell in his jaw, the way his hands flexed. "She's 12, isn't she?" "Mr. Stanton," I said loudly enough for others to hear, "if you're interested in MindBridge's enterprise solutions, you can contact our sales team." I started to walk away. His hand caught my elbow, gentle enough to look polite, firm enough to stop me. "Room 4B, he said quietly. 10 minutes, or I make this conversation public." The conference room was sterile, corporate. He'd commanded it the way he commanded everything, with the assumption it would be given. I closed the door and faced him. "Is she mine?" "No." The word came out flat, final. "She's mine. Only mine." "You know what I mean." "Do I? Because 12 years ago, you were pretty clear about not wanting any complications." He flinched. "Good. I had the right to know." "You had the right?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You had your lawyer threaten to destroy me if I didn't disappear. You had my bank accounts frozen. You had me erased, Richard. What rights are we discussing exactly?" I was protecting the company." "You were protecting yourself?" He sat heavily in one of the chairs and for a moment looked older than his 45 years. "My mother told me you'd left town, started over. She said it was best for everyone." "Your mother knew?" "She handled things. After." He ran a hand through hair still thick, still perfectly styled. "I didn't ask questions." "Of course you didn't. Questions were complications." "Don't." His CEO mask slipped, showing something raw underneath. "You think it was easy? You vanished. No trace. I tried." "You tried?" I slammed my hands on the table. "I cleaned motel rooms while pregnant. I gave birth alone. I watched my baby struggle to breathe because she was underweight." "Where exactly were you trying, Richard?" "I didn't know about the baby." "Get rid of it." "Those were your exact words." "I thought you had." "Well, I didn't. I couldn't. And thank God, because she's the only good thing that came from us." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Manhattan spread below us, his kingdom of glass and steel. "What's her name?" I hesitated. But what was the point of lying now? Mira Emerson." "Emerson. My grandmother's name, my name now. She has my eyes. She has her own eyes that see the world in ways you never could." He turned back to me. "I want to meet her, properly." "Absolutely not. She's my daughter. She's the child you threw away." I moved toward the door. "You don't get to claim her now that she's brilliant and whole and wonderful. You don't get to waltz in after I did all the work." "I have rights. You have nothing." I paused at the door. "And if you try to pursue this, I'll go public with everything. The affairs, the coercion, the illegal freezing of my assets. I kept records, Richard, insurance." "You're threatening me?" "I'm protecting my daughter, something you never understood how to do." The story broke 3 days later. Not from Richard, from Patricia Holloway, who'd apparently grown a conscience in her retirement. Tech Titan's secret child screamed from every blog, every gossip site, every business newsletter. My phone exploded. Reporters at our house. Mira's school calling, concerned about security, investors wanting to know if this scandal would affect MindBridge's stability. Mom? Mira stood in my home office doorway, iPad in hand. Why are there pictures of us online? I'd prepared for this moment for 12 years. Practiced the words. But looking at my daughter's confused face, everything I'd planned evaporated. Come here, baby. She curled into my lap like she had when she was small, though her legs now dangled nearly to the floor. I told her the truth. Simply, honestly, about a young woman who loved the wrong man, about choosing to be her mother when everything else fell apart, about building our life from scratch. So Richard Stanton is my biological father? Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, does he know about my dyslexia? Of all the questions she could have asked. No, baby, he doesn't know anything about you. Good. She sat up, fierce. He doesn't get to know, not the important stuff. But Richard wasn't done. The legal notice arrived the next morning. Petition for paternity testing, visitation rights, shared custody. Everything I'd feared, wrapped in expensive letterhead. Worse was the counter notice from Stanton Tech's board. Cease and desist. Defamation claims. If I didn't sign an NDA and refuse all press, they'd bury me in litigation. They can't do this, my lawyer said, but her eyes said otherwise. They can't win, but they can drain you dry trying. That night, I found Mira coding furiously, building what looked like a presentation. What's this, baby? My speech for tomorrow's accessibility conference. She looked up, eyes blazing. I'm going to tell them about us. All of it. How you saved me. How MindBridge saved others. How nobody gets to erase us again. Mira, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned back to her screen. He threw us away, but we turned into diamonds anyway. People should know that. The call came at midnight. Richard, control your daughter. Like you controlled me? This isn't a game, Julia. The board is furious. The IPO is your problem, not mine. I'll withdraw the custody petition. Tell her not to give that speech. Tell her yourself. Oh, wait, you can't. Because you don't know her. Don't know that she hates being told what to do, that she puts hot sauce on everything, that she reads herself to sleep with astronomy books, that she wants to code for NASA someday. Silence. Then quietly, I could have known. No, you couldn't have. Because knowing her would have meant seeing her as a person, not a complication, and you never learned how to do that. The Austin Convention Center was packed. EdTech professionals, teachers, parents of kids with learning differences. And there, in the third row, Richard Stanton, trying to blend in, failing spectacularly. Mira took the stage like she owned it. 12 years old, 4 feet 11 inches of determination in her lucky purple dress. Hi, she began. I'm Mira Emerson. I have dyslexia, and I want to tell you about my mom. She talked about watching me work 3 jobs, about falling asleep to the sound of my coding, about being my first beta tester, my harshest critic, my biggest cheerleader. Some people get handed their success, she said, looking directly at Richard. Others build it from nothing. My mom built MindBridge from love, just love, and that's why it works. The standing ovation was immediate. But I only watched Richard, saw him wipe his eyes, saw him leave before she left the stage. That evening, an email. I withdraw all claims. The board has been handled. Tell her I'm proud of both of you. R. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. He wants to meet me, Mira said 6 months later, looking at the email on her phone. Says he'll respect whatever boundaries I set. We were in our new office. MindBridge had outgrown the garage startup phase. Glass walls covered in kids' thank you drawings, a testing lab full of laughter, 30 employees who believed in our mission. What do you want? I asked. She spun in her chair, thinking. I want to know if I got my math brain from him, and I want him to see what he missed. So we set terms. Public space, 1 hour. I'd be present. Any pushiness, any manipulation, and we walked. He chose a quiet corner of a hotel restaurant. Showed up 5 minutes early, nervous in a way I'd never seen. When Mira walked in, he stood so fast he knocked over his water glass. Hi, she said simply. Hi. They sat, studied each other. The similarities were undeniable. The eyes, the analytical tilt of their heads, the way they both tapped their fingers when thinking. I have questions, Mira announced. Okay. Do you have dyslexia? No, but my sister does. Did you help her? No, I thought she should try harder. Mira nodded, filing that away. What's your favorite programming language? And suddenly they were talking code. Algorithms. The elegance of Python versus the power of C++. Watching them, I saw what could have been, should have been, if Richard had been a different man 12 years ago. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, looking at me, "for all of it. I don't need your apology, but I need to give it." He turned to Mira. "I made the worst mistake of my life. Twice. Letting your mother go. Not fighting to know you." "Why?" Mira's question was genuine, curious rather than accusatory. "Because I was afraid. Of responsibility, of change, of love that I couldn't control." He laughed bitterly. "I controlled a billion-dollar company but couldn't handle the idea of a baby." "That's sad," Mira said matter-of-factly. "You missed everything good." "I know." The hour ended. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled out a folder. "What's this?" "College fund. In her name. No strings. No conditions." He looked at Mira. "You want to code for NASA? You should have every opportunity." "We don't need—" I started. "It's not about need," he interrupted gently. "It's about what she deserves. What you both deserved from the beginning." Mira took the folder, practical as always. "Thank you. I'll use it to help other kids too. Mom taught me that success means pulling others up with you." Richard's smile was sad. "She taught you well." We email now, carefully, professionally. He sends Mira coding challenges. She sends him updates on MindBridge's impact. He donated anonymously to our scholarship fund. Anonymously, but I knew. He's learned to give without taking credit. "Do you hate him?" Mira asked one evening as we watched the sunset from our back porch. "I did for a long time, but not now. Now I nothing him. He's just a man who made choices. We made better ones." "Are you happy, Mom? Really happy?" I looked at my daughter. Brilliant, kind, strong. Thought about the company we'd built, the lives we'd changed, the future stretching ahead bright with possibility. "Yeah, baby, I really am." Stanton Tech went public last month. Richard stepped down as CEO, citing personal reevaluation of priorities. He teaches now, pro bono coding classes in underserved communities. Learning, maybe, what it means to build rather than control. I bought a house last week, our forever home, with a workshop for Mira and garden space for me. On the front door, a small plaque. "Success isn't defined by where you start. It's defined by how you rise." We rose. Oh, how we rose. 5 years later, I stood in the same Marriott Marquis ballroom where everything had unraveled. This time, I was the closing keynote. Innovation through adversity. Building ed tech that matters. "You nervous?" Mira asked, now 17 and headed to MIT in the fall. Taller than me now, confident in ways I'd never been at her age. "Always." "Liar." She grinned. "You've given this talk 100 times. Never here, though. Never where it all began. Never with him in the audience." Richard had RSVP'd through his assistant. A professional courtesy. He sat in the back row, graying now, wearing a simple button-down instead of his usual designer suit. We'd developed a rhythm over the years. Birthday emails, holiday cards, the occasional coffee when Mira asked. He'd learned to be grateful for scraps. I'd learned to stop punishing him for old wounds. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "Julia Emerson, Time Magazine's Innovator of the Year." The applause carried me to the podium. I looked out at 500 faces. Educators, developers, parents of kids like Mira. My people. Our people. 17 years ago, I began. I sat in a bathroom stall in this very hotel, pregnant and terrified. Having just discovered my husband's affair, I thought my life was over. Silence. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. Today, MindBridge helps 8 million children worldwide learn in ways their brains understand. We've partnered with UNESCO. We've brought adaptive learning to refugee camps, rural schools, anywhere kids are told they're not enough. I talked about failure as foundation, about building from rubble, about choosing to transform pain into purpose. I didn't mention Richard by name, but I didn't need to. This wasn't about him anymore. It had stopped being about him the moment Mira took her first breath. Success, I concluded, isn't about what you achieve. It's about who you lift up along the way. Every child who reads their first book using our software, every parent who stops crying at homework time, every teacher who finally reaches that unreachable kid, that's success. The standing ovation was immediate, but I only had eyes for my daughter, beaming from the front row. My North Star, my reason. Afterwards, at the reception, Richard approached. We'd gotten better at this. the careful dance of shared history and separate lives. That was extraordinary, he said simply. Thank you. I mean it. What you have built, what you've done. I spent 20 years building a company. You spent 17 building a legacy. We both built what we knew how to build. No, he shook his head. You built what mattered. I'm still learning the difference. Mira appeared at my elbow, protective as always. Mom, they want you for the group photo. Be right there. I looked at Richard. You could join, if you want. Board members and major donors are invited. His eyes widened slightly. I'm neither. You donated $10 million to our scholarship fund. Anonymously? Richard. I said his name gently without heat. Nobody's anonymous to the person they used to be married to. Come on. One photo. He followed us to where the group was assembling. Mira naturally moved between us, chatting with other donors about her MIT plans, her summer internship at NASA, the accessibility apps she was developing. Our daughter. Brilliant and whole and nothing like either of us had imagined. Everything better than we could have dreamed. Thank you, Richard said quietly as the photographer adjusted his lens, for letting me see this, see her, even a little. Thank you, I replied, surprising myself, for letting us go. The camera flashed. 3 people who'd found their way to forgiveness, even if they'd never be a family. 3 lives that intersected and diverged, and somehow, against all odds, had each found their own version of happiness. Walking out into the Manhattan night, Mira linked her arm through mine. You okay, Mom? Yeah, baby, I really am. And I was. We'd built our life from ashes and made it beautiful. Not despite the pain, but because of what we'd chosen to do with it. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving yourself right. We'd done that. Oh, how we'd done that.
Damn it. How foolish was I to believe the past could stay buried. I'm Emily Torres, a pediatrician, a mother of 2, and a woman once left without a single goodbye. But when that wedding invitation arrived, it also unearthed a secret that had been buried for 8 long years. Would you dare to stand with your 2 children in front of the man who abandoned you 8 years ago, right at his wedding? I did it. Not to cause chaos, but to make him face the truth he once denied. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you choose silence or confrontation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't look away. Because what comes next will reveal even more buried truths. I never thought I'd see that name again. Nathaniel Grayson. But this morning, there it was, shimmering in gold ink on a wedding invitation neatly placed in my mailbox. I stood frozen on the porch. The September breeze in Savannah carried the damp scent of oaks and jasmine, but all I could feel was the dry sting in my throat. The invitation burned in my hand like an invisible reminder of a past that was never truly laid to rest. Nathan, the man who once promised he'd never leave me. The man who vanished without a word the night I told him I was pregnant. The man I spent months searching for in desperation, only to be met with a silence as vast and cold as a void. My heart stopped when I read the location. Miami, the Everblue Resort, September 17th. Lavish, luxurious, a world away from the quiet little home I shared with my boys on the southern edge of the city. A place glamorous enough to host a high society wedding, and more importantly, far enough that he must have been sure I wouldn't come. So why send the invitation? I tucked it carefully into the pocket of my white lab coat, my heart still racing. That day at the clinic, I couldn't concentrate. Parents' questions, the cries of children, even familiar medical symptoms, they all blurred together. One question consumed me. Why now? After all these silent years, why would he want me at his wedding? When I got home, the twins were already waiting on the sofa, their dark eyes wide with curiosity. Noah looked half asleep, his head resting on his brother's shoulder, while Elias was still playing with his paper airplane. "Mom, did you get a letter?" Elias asked, eyes sharp and knowing. I nodded, quickly hiding the invitation behind my back. "Just something from the hospital," I lied, slipping into the kitchen as if being busy could somehow erase the memories. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the soft yellow glow of the night lamp casting a hazy veil over everything. The invitation lay neatly on the table, shimmering like some cruel joke. I opened it again. The elegant script, the polite phrasing, each word felt like a dagger to the chest. I could almost hear his voice in the distance of my mind. I'll always be here for you. Always. What a fragile, laughable word. I used to think something had happened to him. An accident, memory loss. Maybe he was caught up in something too big to escape. I wrote letters, made calls, sent messages. I even flew to his office in Chicago on a desperate, ridiculous trip. All in vain. If he truly wanted to find me, could anything have stopped him? I looked over at my sleeping boys. Their faces mirrored his so perfectly. The deep eyes, the straight nose, even the way their lips pressed together as they slept. I had kept the truth from them for 7 years, not because I hated him, but because I didn't want them growing up with a hollow shadow of a man they'd never know. But now? His silence had lasted long enough, and now he wanted me to come, to watch him take another woman's hand beneath glittering lights, as if that would be the final punctuation to a chapter he never bothered to finish. Or maybe he wanted me to see what he had lost. I didn't know for sure, but what I did know was this: I couldn't keep running forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the invitation still lying on the table, a silent witness to a sleepless night. I sat quietly with a cup of coffee, absent-mindedly stirring the spoon in slow circles. My thoughts were a tangled mess. Should I go? If I went, I'd have to face the past, face the man who once shattered me. But if I didn't, could I live with not knowing why he left me? Soft footsteps padded across the wooden floor. Noah rubbed his eyes as he walked into the living room, his hair tousled from a long dream. He climbed into the chair, leaned his head against my shoulder, and wrapped his tiny arms around my elbow. "Mom, you didn't sleep?" I shook my head. Just thinking. Thinking. That was the only way I could describe what I was doing. Not confusion, not fear, but a storm of emotions tangled together. Worry, anticipation, bitterness, and a faint, fragile hope. Noah soon drifted back to sleep in my arms. I gently stroked his hair, my heart softening. Should I bring the boys with me? They had a right to know who their father was. But were they strong enough to step into a world where my past would be laid bare, piece by piece? I took a deep breath. The flight to Miami was less than 2 hours, but some journeys can't be measured in distance, only in the number of years your heart has struggled to forget. That afternoon, I called Lily. She was the only close friend I had kept in touch with since college, the one who held me when Nathan disappeared, the first to cradle the twins when they were born. Her voice was the same, blunt, fiery, but full of love. I had barely said, "Nathan sent an invitation," when she let out a furious sound on the other end. I didn't reply. I just sat there, letting her speak every word I didn't have the strength to say. When her voice finally softened, only heavy breathing left in the silence, I whispered, "I think I'm going." Silence. 1 beat, 2. Then a long sigh. Quiet, as if she understood that no one else could make this decision for me. I set the phone down and stood before the bedroom mirror. Staring back at me was a 32-year-old woman with dark circles under her eyes, faint lines at the corners of her mouth, and the gaze of someone who had been strong for far too long. I looked into my own eyes and asked the question no one could answer. Am I truly ready? That evening, while the boys rewatched a cartoon they knew by heart, I quietly began packing my suitcase in the bedroom. Each dress, each outfit, I chose more carefully than usual, though I wasn't even sure why. Maybe a part of me wanted to prove that I wasn't the girl he left behind. I was Emily, a pediatrician, mother of 2 beautiful boys, a woman who rebuilt her life from the ruins. As I folded the 4th dress, the door creaked open. Elias stood there, leaning against the frame, his eyes curious and cautious. "Where are you going, Mom?" I sat down slowly beside the suitcase. I couldn't dodge it forever. I took his hand, small, soft, like a budding leaf not yet fully opened. "I have something I need to do in Miami. Just a short trip." He stayed silent for a moment, then murmured, almost to himself, "Miami has beaches, right, Mom?" I nodded, hiding the tremble in my chest. "Will you take us with you?" I froze. I had never planned on bringing the boys, but now, looking into Elias's eyes, I knew I couldn't leave them out of this part of my life. I couldn't let them stand outside the truth, the way Nathan once left me outside his. I smiled, though my eyes had already grown misty. Yes, we're going together. 3 days later, we landed in Miami on a sweltering afternoon. The air smelled of salt and bougainvillea, a scent I once knew well when I still loved him. A scent that brought back memories of walking hand in hand along the shore when I still believed love could conquer all. The boys were thrilled by the change. Elias marveled at the yellow taxi zipping down the boulevard, while Noah kept asking if the hotel had a pool. They didn't know. To them, this was just an adventure. Only I knew that I was walking straight into the eye of a storm that had been building for 8 long years. The hotel sat on the southern beach, pristine and white like a dream you had to pay dearly to enter. I didn't belong here. Not anymore. I had once been the woman beside Nathan in places like this, attending cocktail parties, gala fundraisers, global conferences. I had once been the doctor's girlfriend of Chicago's brightest young billionaire. Now I was just a single mother, with 2 children and a suitcase full of unfinished decisions. That night, I stood on the balcony, the sea breeze tossing my sun-dried hair. Below, the sound crew had begun testing music. Uniformed staff pushed carts of white orchids toward the stage where tomorrow's wedding would take place. I closed my eyes. The scent of orchids, the sound of waves, and distant melodies blended into something surreal. I asked myself, why am I here? For answers? For justice? Or because I still haven't stopped loving him? A soft knock broke my thoughts. "Mom, I can't sleep," Noah whispered, Elias trailing behind. I opened the door and welcomed their small bodies into my arms. Part of me wanted to shield them from everything, but another part knew. They were the very reason I had the courage to come here. As the 3 of us sat together, looking out at the dark ocean, Elias asked hesitantly, "The friend you came to see, are they really special?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. They used to be very special. The next morning we had breakfast in the room. I carefully chose a long teal dress, formal but not attention-grabbing. I wasn't here to make a scene, but I wasn't here to bow my head either. Inside me, waves churned, of anger, rejection, and grief that had never been fully mourned. As I stepped out of the elevator, my hands trembled slightly, but when I saw my 2 boys holding hands, walking a few steps ahead, I knew, no matter what waited on the other side of that ballroom door, I was ready. Ready to look into the eyes of the man who once shattered my heart and claim the truth that should have been mine all along. I always imagined that moment, the one where I'd see the man who once broke me, would happen in a quiet room with a few calm questions and a late apology. But no. Fate chose a very different stage. Soft classical music, blooming white flowers, and hundreds of eyes watching. The beachfront lawn where the wedding was taking place looked like something out of a movie. A white, orchid-covered arch, ribbons fluttering in the breeze, and a string quartet playing melodies so delicate it almost made you forget the deepest wounds leave no visible scars. I walked slowly between the 2 rows of chairs, holding Noah's tiny hand. Elias walked on my other side, equally calm. Each step felt like I was treading over memories. I could hear my heart pounding, not from nerves, but from the storm of emotions rising inside. And then I saw him, Nathaniel Grayson, standing at the end of the aisle beside the bride in her pristine white gown, the blonde woman I'd seen before on magazine covers. Her eyes were now a mix of confusion and anger. Nathan, meanwhile, was frozen. Our eyes met. Everything around us seemed to slow. The violin faded, the waves disappeared, and there he was. The man I once loved with everything I had, standing in his sharp tuxedo, face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. I didn't know what my own face looked like in that moment, but I was no longer the same Emily from 8 years ago. I had changed. I tightened my grip on my child's hand, and then, as if the scene had been scripted long ago, Noah looked toward Nathan, his eyes full of innocent curiosity. "Mom, is that him?" My son's question sliced through the tense air like a blade. Nathan blinked, stepping back slightly. His eyes never left the children, as if seeing his own reflection split into 2 living, breathing mirrors. I didn't need to say a word. The silence said everything. Nathan began to walk toward us, slowly. The calm, composed expression he always wore in the media was gone. In its place was a haze of disbelief, confusion, and fear. The bride, Victoria, clutched his arm and asked something I couldn't hear. But Nathan didn't answer. He just looked at me, then at the children, as if trying to piece together a truth he never dared to face. The sea breeze lifted my hair. I stood my ground. I no longer felt afraid, no longer felt lesser than anyone here. I was the mother of 2 children. I had survived 8 long years with a torn heart, yet one still warm enough to raise them in love. Nathan's voice finally came, hoarse. "Emily, what is this?" Perhaps, like me, he never imagined this day would come. I didn't answer. I no longer needed to explain. Not anymore. Elias stepped forward, looking up. "Are you our dad?" The question landed like an explosion in the silence. I heard someone drop a wine glass, the sharp intake of breath, the soft click of cameras, phones lifted discreetly. But I didn't care. I only looked at Nathan, and for the first time, I saw him completely lose control. He stammered something. Victoria let go of his arm and stepped back, eyes burning through me. But I didn't flinch. I bent down and wrapped my arms around Noah and Elias. Then I stood tall, eyes locked on the man who had abandoned me, the man now standing in the very heaven he had built, which, brick by brick, was starting to collapse. "Yes, Nathan, they're your children." I don't remember exactly what happened after that. I only remember Victoria walking away first, her face pale as if someone had slapped her, the murmurs of guests, the weight of their stares. And Nathan, frozen. I turned away, holding my son's hands. I hadn't come here to beg. I came to show him what he had missed, and this time, I was the one who held the power. As we left the lawn, I heard footsteps quicken behind me. A hand touched my shoulder, but I didn't turn. I spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "You invited me to witness your wedding, Nathan, but I came so you could see what you've lost." I didn't think he'd follow me, but as I walked across the lawn, leading the boys back toward the hotel lobby, I heard hurried footsteps behind us. Quick, unsteady. No longer the composed, graceful stride of Nathan Grayson, the man who once graced the cover of Forbes, who held an entire real estate empire in his hands. Now he looked like a man shattered by a truth no one saw coming. "Emily!" I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "You can't just show up and walk away like that." His voice cracked, breath ragged. For the first time, I heard that voice falter. I turned slowly. Noah tightened his grip on my hand. Elias leaned into my side, his eyes watching Nathan as if trying to make sense of something unfamiliar and suspicious. I asked calmly, "What do you want me to do, Nathan? Stay and congratulate you on your wedding?" He shook his head. His arms hung uselessly at his sides, as though he no longer knew where to place his faith, not even in himself. "The kids, are they really—" He didn't finish, but his eyes said the rest. He didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't not. No one could deny the eerie resemblance, the eyebrows, the eyes, the way Elias wrinkled his nose when thinking. I looked straight into his eyes. For the first time in 8 years. "Yes. Your children. Twins. 7 years old." Nathan took a step back, as if each word I spoke was a blow to the chest. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. Just hollow. He asked, "Why didn't you try to find me?" I let out a soft laugh, but inside, every nerve in me was trembling. "I called. I texted. I wrote letters. I even went to your office in Chicago, remember? 22nd floor, beige curtains. The receptionist in a sea blue blouse told me you'd moved a month ago. No forwarding address. No message left behind." Nathan said nothing. Of course he didn't remember. I continued. "I was pregnant. Alone. In a city where everyone knew me as Nathan Grayson's girlfriend. You left without a word. No trace. Not even a rushed, 'I'm sorry.'" Nathan lowered his head. No denial. Maybe because there was nothing left to say. "You could have come to the house," he murmured weakly. I gave a dry chuckle. "Do you remember your mother? She once called me a cheap shadow of a real woman because I accidentally spilled red wine on her Versace dress." He looked up. His eyes were glassy. but not from sorrow, from shame. You think she pushed you away? I didn't answer, because I didn't think, I knew. But I didn't need to say it. I didn't need to accuse. I had once hoped he would figure it out on his own, that one day he would understand I hadn't left, I hadn't hidden. I had been pushed out, from his life, from that world, by doors that never opened again. Nathan turned away for a few seconds, as if trying to compose himself, to fight the dizziness spreading from his head to his hands. When he looked back, his voice was shaking. I need to know the truth. All of it. Will you let me take a DNA test? I hesitated for a beat, then nodded. Fine. But not for me. For you. So you can believe it. I led the children back to our hotel room. Nathan didn't follow. He stood there on the stone path, watching us like a man being dragged out of a dream. Inside, Elias tossed his backpack onto the bed in silence. He'd never liked this kind of drama. Noah sat by the window, hugging his knees, staring at the waves. I sat between them, arms wrapped around both. My mind was spinning. Not because I feared the DNA test results, I never doubted them, but because of one question that had lodged deep in my heart. Now that he knows, then what? Would he have the courage to be a father, or did he just want to clear a debt of honor? I didn't need another man in my life. What I needed was the truth to come to light. Not for me, but for my children. I thought, after that wedding day, Nathan would disappear again. This time, out of fear, out of pressure, under the weight of all those eyes that once looked at him with admiration, but now with scrutiny and doubt. But he didn't. 3 days later, he showed up at the door of my hotel room. Gone was the polished image of the man who once led the East Coast's real estate industry. His designer suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes, and in his hand, the sealed envelope containing the DNA test results. I opened the door, said nothing. He stepped inside and handed me the envelope, but I didn't need to open it. I had known the truth from the moment he looked at Elias and couldn't speak. He sat down on the armchair, quietly. His hands trembled, but his eyes never left mine. They're mine. A short sentence, like a confession. I sat across from him, keeping my distance. The air between us felt thick, like the sky before a storm. Only this storm had been held back for 8 long years. So now you believe me? I asked, my voice calm, but cold enough to cut through whatever wall he still had left. Nathan nodded. No excuses, no justifications. After a moment, he spoke, slowly, as if afraid every word might collapse the last of his understanding. I don't get it. Why was there nothing? No texts, no calls, no letters? Nothing. I pressed my lips together. I had told him before that I tried, that he didn't hear. But this time, I didn't repeat it. Instead, I looked straight at him. Do you really believe I stayed silent for 8 years just to show up and put on a performance at your wedding? He shook his head, gaze distant. Then, quietly, I thought you were angry, that you left on your own, that you wanted to disappear. I let out a laugh. Not bitter anymore, just hollow. Then why did you send me the wedding invitation? Nathan didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the balcony, where golden afternoon sunlight spilled in, bright but not warm. I don't know. Maybe, deep down, I wanted you to see that I'd done just fine without you. Maybe a part of me wanted to prove something. I nodded. That answer, small, imperfect, was everything I had sensed all along. Silence settled again, until he asked abruptly, My mother, did she have anything to do with it? I looked at him for a long time. A very long time, as if weighing the difference between forgiveness and truth. Finally, I stood up, opened the drawer, and pulled out a thin folder. Documents I had kept all these years, not for revenge, but for a moment like this. When the truth needed to be said and my hands would no longer shake doing it, I placed the folder in front of him. Inside were copies of the official post office notice stating my mail had been marked as refused by the recipient, an email from a former employee at Grayson Group's legal office confirming an internal no-forwarding directive for any personal mail addressed to Nathan from Emily Torres. and the twins' original birth certificates, with the father's name field blurred out under an administrative seal. Nathan picked up each page, flipping slowly. His eyes blinked rapidly, as if the weight of every word was breaking him down from the inside. He said nothing for 10 minutes. Then finally, in a voice I barely recognized, he whispered, "My mother. She really did this?" I didn't reply, but I saw his shoulders shake. For the first time, I saw him fall apart. I trusted her. I never questioned her. I placed a hand on the table, not touching him. "I don't need you to hate her. I just need you to know I didn't abandon you, and neither did your children." Nathan closed the folder, his hands gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then he looked up, and in his eyes something had shifted. No longer doubt, but resolve. "I need to see her. I need to know. Who else knew? Who helped cover it up?" I nodded. That was his path to walk now, not mine. I had done my part, made sure the truth didn't stay buried. That night, after turning off the lights, with the children already fast asleep, I sat by the window. The night breeze swept in from the ocean, cold and salty. I thought of his mother, the woman with a face sharp as a blade and a voice as gentle as it was cutting. I used to admire her, until the day she smiled and told me I wasn't enough to belong in their world. I didn't know what Nathan would do next, but I knew one thing for sure. He was no longer that obedient son, no longer the man who let others decide for him, and I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer had to hold everything together alone. The truth had surfaced, and from here, the real game was just beginning. I once read somewhere, "Not everyone who wants to be a father is ready to become one. It takes someone willing to step into an unfamiliar life with a bare heart and hands always ready to hold." I don't know if Nathan ever read those words, but when he came back, this time not to demand answers or confront the past, but simply to stay, I realized he was trying to learn how to begin from the smallest, simplest things. No more promises, no grand words, just presence, a little more each day. At first, Elias kept his distance. He was quieter, more stubborn, and mature in a way that felt like he had taken on all the hurt for his twin brother. Every time Nathan entered the room, Elias would pretend to be absorbed in his game, never looking up, never replying. Noah was more silent, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet waiting, a wish he hadn't yet found the words for. I didn't interfere. I never forced my sons to accept anyone, just as I had never forced myself to forgive. That afternoon it was raining lightly, just enough to crack the rhythm of the sun. Nathan stood outside the guest house door, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate from the small shop on the corner, the one I used to take the kids to every Saturday. He didn't call me out, didn't text, just stood there, one shoulder soaked, waiting. I watched him through the slit in the curtain, and in that still figure, I saw something patient, unguarded. Gone was the Nathan of cocktail parties and galas. All that remained was a man learning to ask for permission to step into the lives of the children who shared his blood. Elias opened the door before I could. He looked at Nathan, then at the 2 cups of chocolate, and said something I'll never forget. "I don't know who you are, but I know my mom doesn't need strangers who show up with things and disappear again." Then he closed the door. Nathan didn't react. He placed the cups on the doorstep and walked away. I opened the door a minute later. The hot chocolate was still warm. The next day, Noah got a fever. He didn't say much, just curled up in the corner, pale, lips dry, eyes unfocused. I carried him to the car, ready to drive to our usual clinic, but just as I stepped into the lobby, Nathan appeared. He didn't ask. He didn't offer. He simply held out his hand. "Let me drive." I looked at him, hesitated for a second, then nodded. We rode in silence. Noah lay in the back seat, breathing unevenly. Outside, the rain returned, each drop tapping into my growing helplessness. When we arrived at the hospital, Nathan carried him inside. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask me what to do. He just moved, as if trying to redeem 8 years, one determined step at a time. In the emergency room, as the nurse took Noah's temperature and checked his vitals, I stood beside them, hands shaking. Not because of the illness, because of the memories, alone in the delivery room. Alone through the contractions. Alone signing the birth certificate with the father's name left blank. This time, I wasn't alone. Nathan sat by the bed, holding Noah's hand. He didn't speak. He didn't try to comfort him. He didn't pretend. He just held on. I looked at that hand. Larger, rougher, covered in small scars, wrapping around the tiny fingers of our son, and something inside me softened. Noah woke up the next afternoon. His eyes opened slowly, scanned the ceiling, then turned to the left. Nathan was still there. "Dad?" His voice was hoarse, uncertain. But those two syllables, "Dad," tore through the space between them like lightning. Nathan didn't say anything. He just nodded. I turned away, hiding the storm in my eyes. From that moment, things began to shift. We brought Noah home the next day. Elias said nothing as his brother walked in, still hugging a pillow, cheek marked with the imprint of hospital sheets. But that night, I saw Elias standing at the door, watching Nathan read a bedtime story to Noah. I stood behind them, silent. Elias didn't enter, but he didn't walk away either. One night passed, then two, then a week. Elias still didn't speak. But each time Nathan came, he no longer left the room. Sometimes he glanced over, as if waiting to see if maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. One dry evening, I sat with Nathan on the balcony. He asked me quietly, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the street, at the blurry lights, at the small hands that were slowly learning to trust someone who had once vanished. Then I said slowly, "Forgiveness doesn't happen in a day. It's a process. Every hug, every visit, every day you choose not to disappear. That's a step." Nathan turned to me, his eyes resting on my face for a long moment, but he didn't ask for more. He understood. And so did I. Because the deepest wounds, they're not healed with words. They need time, and a heart patient enough to stay. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need a look, a small piece of evidence, or a silence that stretches until it suffocates, and everything will collapse on its own. I wasn't there when Nathan went to his mother's estate that day, but I knew, somehow, that he went with a heart no longer whole. He told me that morning, just one sentence, "I need to see her." I didn't ask anything more. I saw it in his eyes. Something had awakened. Not rage, not pain, clarity. A man seeing his life for the first time and realizing he'd been led too far, for too long, by someone he had always believed was everything. Mrs. Grayson's estate stood nestled between rows of maple trees in the historic Riverside district. I had been there once, a long time ago. Back then I was young, wearing a cream-colored dress and holding a small bouquet, thinking that politeness would be enough to earn me acceptance. I was wrong, and so was Nathan. She greeted him with a half-smile, the same poised demeanor, the same soft, diplomatic tone of someone too familiar with power. "You've come back, Nathan. I suppose you've seen her." He didn't answer. He placed the envelope, the one with all the documents, on the table and looked straight at the woman who once called him the perfect son. "Why did you do it?" She glanced at the envelope as if it were an outdated gift, her eyes unmoved. "Because I knew what was best for you." A simple sentence, gentle and cruel. Nathan stood in silence for a few seconds. "You destroyed my whole life. Do you know that?" She poured tea, not looking at him. "I protected you. You were too young. Do you know what she wrote in those letters? Words full of emotion, full of demands, full of dependence. She was weak. She couldn't keep up with you. She wasn't worthy of your place." Nathan clenched his fists, but he didn't shout. He didn't slam the table. He just exhaled, a breath that released 8 years of silence. "And the kids? Were they not worthy either?" She froze. The teacup trembled slightly. "They weren't part of the plan." When Nathan told me that part later that night, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Some mothers love their children through control, and sometimes that form of love is the most elegant shape of manipulation. Nathan didn't argue with her. He just stood up, picked up the envelope. "I used to think you were the only person I could trust, but today I choose to trust what you always saw as a burden, my feelings." And he left, without looking back. The next afternoon, he came to find me. I was reading in the living room while Elias sketched something at the table. Nathan didn't say much. He just sat down, placed his hand on the table, and wore the expression of someone made of stone. After a while, he said, "My mother didn't apologize. She doesn't think she did anything wrong." I nodded, not surprised. "But I don't need her apology anymore," he continued. "I need to live honestly, and for the first time, I want to choose for myself." I looked at him. His eyes no longer held confusion, only weariness, and something distant. Maybe peace. "Elias is still quiet," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "He needs time." Nathan nodded. "I'm not here to push, but I won't leave." I closed my eyes for a moment. Something inside me began to soften. Not forgiveness, not love, not again, but a kind of acceptance of what once broke, of the pieces now slowly being placed back together. That night, Elias left a note on the table. The handwriting was messy, ink smudged like he had written it in a rush. "If you really want to be my dad, then don't give up, because I'm watching to see if you deserve it." Nathan didn't say anything after reading it, but he held the note all night. He folded it carefully, as if sealing away a sacred contract. We didn't return to Savannah right away, though in my heart, home had always been the little house by the old oak tree, where the mornings began with the sound of the garbage truck, the smell of cinnamon waffles from the elderly neighbor, and memories folded gently into every brick. But I stayed in Miami for a few more weeks. Not for Nathan, for the children. I saw Noah smiling more, the way he high-fived Nathan after winning a video game, clumsy but sincere. I saw Elias beginning to ask questions, not with words, but with glances, whenever Nathan picked him up from art class or sat quietly at the breakfast table pouring orange juice for all three of them without being asked. Some changes make no noise. They slip into life like mist, silent but deep. Nathan didn't move in with us. He rented a small apartment 3 blocks from the hotel. Every afternoon he came by. He didn't ask for permission, didn't try to force his way in. He just knocked, waiting for the kids to open the door. Sometimes he stayed for an hour, just to listen to Noah talk about school, or to watch Elias sketch imaginary maps of cities with names like Hopeville and Papa City. I watched him from a distance, not to guard myself, but as if I were getting to know someone entirely new. No longer Nathan Grayson of the past, just Nathan, a man learning to be a father without anyone teaching him how. One morning, while I was making coffee, Elias walked in and handed me a paper. "Mom, can you sign this?" I looked down. It was a school transfer form for a charter school back in Savannah, the one he'd mentioned long ago, then stopped bringing up after last New Year. "Are you sure?" Elias nodded. "I want to go back home, but if he wants to come too, I won't stop him." I froze. Something cracked open inside me, not quite an emotion, more like a release, like someone whispering, "It's going to be okay." We returned to Savannah a month later. The old house was still the same. The oak tree still leaned over the porch like a protective hand. But everything had changed. Nathan drove us home. He said nothing when I unlocked the gate. Didn't ask questions as I slipped the key into the door. He simply stepped back, placed our bags gently on the steps, and said, "If you need help bringing things in, I'm here." I turned back, nodded, didn't say thank you, but my eyes said enough. Nathan didn't move in, but he rented an apartment a few blocks away. He requested a job transfer to the Grayson Group's Savannah branch, a lower position, fewer lights, less recognition, but closer to what mattered most, the family he once lost. On Elias's first day at his new school, a light rain fell. Nathan stood at the gate, holding an umbrella as Elias walked out. Elias reached for the jacket he handed him, quietly put it on, and walked straight toward me. But just before he passed, I heard him whisper, just loud enough for 2 people to hear, "Thanks, Dad." Nathan didn't reply. He just stood still, his hand tightening ever so slightly, as if trying to steady himself. Noah skipped behind them, hand in Nathan's, chattering away about his art class. And me, I didn't try to imagine what would happen next. I didn't ask for promises, didn't need vows of the future. I just needed to see him here, every day, even in silence. One early autumn evening, I was folding laundry when Nathan called. He didn't say much, just asked, "Do you need anything?" I paused, then replied, "Some coffee, the usual brand from the old shop." He said, "I'll bring it over. Not because of the coffee, just because I want to." I smiled. No promises, just presents.
I was abandoned by my husband while pregnant with twins, penniless, homeless, with nothing but a pregnancy test and the threat of a lawsuit. And then I turned a rundown farm shack into a cheese business that now spans across the American South. I'm Isabel Hart, the woman once called a burden, and this is how I became the CEO of my own life. Before I share my unbelievable journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever overcome something, whether for your family, your kids, or yourself. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. The candles flickered against the crystal wine glasses, casting dancing shadows across the white tablecloth. I'd spent 3 hours preparing Nathaniel's favorite meal, beef Wellington with roasted vegetables and that complicated béarnaise sauce he loved. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed down my green dress, the one he'd bought me for our anniversary last year. In my pocket, the pregnancy test burned like a secret flame. 2 years. 2 years of temperature charts, ovulation tests, and scheduled intimacy that had slowly drained the spontaneity from our marriage. But tonight, finally, I had good news. I heard his key in the lock at 7:43. 13 minutes late, but not unusual for a Thursday. Nathaniel's real estate development firm had been expanding rapidly, swallowing smaller companies across Charlotte like a hungry giant. "Smells good," he said, not looking at me as he set his briefcase on the marble counter. His jaw was tight, the way it got after difficult board meetings. "Rough day?" I asked, pouring him a glass of the Chateau Margaux I'd been saving. He took the glass but didn't drink. "Isabel, we need to talk." Those 4 words. Every spouse's nightmare wrapped in a simple sentence. "After dinner?" I tried, gesturing toward the carefully set table. "Everything's ready and I have something—" "No?" He set the glass down with a decisive clink. "Now." I sank into the chair across from him, my hand unconsciously moving to my pocket. The test crinkled softly. "This isn't working," he said, his gray eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. "Us, this marriage, it's become a burden." The word hit me like a physical blow. "A burden? You don't fit into my world, Isabel. The charity galas, the country club, the business dinners, you're uncomfortable, and it shows. My partner's wives, they have MBAs, they run foundations. You were a nurse who became my office manager. It's not enough anymore." Each word was precise, calculated. This wasn't an emotional outburst, this was a business decision. "I've already spoken to my attorney," he continued. "The house is in my name, as are the investment accounts. I'll give you $10,000 to get settled somewhere. That's generous, considering Georgia law." "Generous?" My voice came out as a whisper. 7 years of marriage, and you're offering me severance pay?" He finally looked at me then, and I saw it. Nothing. No pain, no regret, just mild irritation that this conversation was taking longer than scheduled. "You knew who I was when you married me," he said. "Ambition requires sacrifice. You're not a sacrifice I'm willing to make anymore." I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the hardwood. My hand closed around the pregnancy test in my pocket. "I'm pregnant, Nathaniel." The words hung in the air between us. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, calculation, and finally, cold resolution. "No," he said simply. "You're not. Not with my child. I've been careful." "Careful? We've been trying for 2 years." "You've been trying. I had a vasectomy 6 months ago." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "That's impossible. Last month you said—" I lied. He stood, straightening his tie. "I'm staying at the Ritz tonight. You have 2 weeks to vacate. Any attempt to claim pregnancy will be met with a paternity test demand and a countersuit for fraud." He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. "The BMW lease is in my name, too. Leave the keys on the counter." The door closed with a soft click. I stood there, still gripping the table, staring at the elaborate dinner growing cold. Then I pulled out the test. 2 pink lines, clear as day. My knees buckled, and I slid to the floor, the test clattering across the hardwood. In the morning, I'd have to figure out how to disappear from a life I'd spent 7 years building. But right now, all I could do was sit on my kitchen floor, one hand on my stomach, whispering to the tiny life inside me that somehow, impossibly, existed. I don't know how, I told the cluster of cells that would become my children. But I promise you, we'll be okay. The candles continued to burn, wax pooling on the tablecloth, until one by one they guttered out. The bus smelled like diesel fumes and broken dreams. I pressed my face against the cool window, watching Charlotte's skyline disappear into the humid haze. 22 weeks pregnant, no health insurance, and 9% out my name after buying the bus ticket. That was my new reality. Linwood, Tennessee, population 2,847, hadn't changed much since I'd left for nursing school 10 years ago. The same faded Coca-Cola sign still hung crooked on Henderson's general store. The same pickup trucks circled the town square like bored sharks. Even the gossip, I'd soon learn, had remained remarkably consistent. My grandmother's house had been sold 3 years ago to pay for her nursing home care, but her friend Dolly still ran the Bluebird Cafe on Main Street. She took one look at me, designer jeans I couldn't afford to replace, swollen feet stuffed into flats, and a belly that announced my situation before I could, and her face did that thing Southern women perfect, judgment disguised as sympathy. "Well, Isabel Hart," she said, refilling my water glass for the third time. "Heard you married some fancy developer up in Charlotte. Reckon that didn't work out?" "No, ma'am," I said, focusing on the scrambled eggs I couldn't afford but desperately needed. It didn't. The whisper started before I'd even finished breakfast. By evening, everyone in Linwood knew that the girl who'd gotten above her raising had come crawling back, pregnant and abandoned. The only rental I could afford was a rundown cabin on Sawmill Road, right next to the abandoned juvenile detention center that locals claimed was haunted. The first night, I discovered the cabin's quirks. A toilet that only flushed if you held the handle down while standing on one foot, windows that wouldn't close completely, and a colony of mice that had claimed the kitchen cabinets as sovereign territory. I sat on the moldy mattress, counting my money again, trying to make the math work. It didn't. The next morning, I swallowed my pride and walked the 3 miles to town. My feet were too swollen for that distance, but gas was a luxury I couldn't afford. The Waffle House was hiring, but the manager took one look at my belly and suddenly remembered they'd just filled the position. The Dollar General, the hardware store, even the gas station. Same story, different excuses. It was nearly dark when I passed the farmer's market, where a woman about my age was loading unsold vegetables into an ancient pickup truck. Her overalls were patched with fabric featuring tiny dancing skeletons, and her hair was tied back with what appeared to be a bread bag twist tie. "You're Isabel," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm June. We had biology together junior year. You threw up during the fetal pig dissection." "That was morning sickness," I admitted. "I just didn't know it yet." She laughed, a genuine warm sound that made something in my chest unclench. "Well, that explains why you dropped out. Here, help me with these boxes. Can you lift things?" "I'm pregnant, not broken," I said, grabbing a crate of green beans. That's how it started. June paid me $20 to help her clean and pack vegetables, and somewhere between sorting tomatoes and discussing the proper way to store butternut squash, I found myself telling her everything. About Nathaniel, the vasectomy lie, the pregnancy that shouldn't exist. "Twins," I said, the word still foreign on my tongue. "Found out at the free clinic yesterday. Doctor said it explains why Nathaniel's procedure didn't work. Apparently, it can fail in the first year, and with twins, the hormones are doubled, so—" June whistled low. That man played himself. Cosmic justice right there. She hired me to help with her weekend farmer's market booth. Cash under the table, no questions asked. It wasn't much, but combined with cleaning houses for the church ladies who pitied me enough to overlook my scandal, I could just barely make rent. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and Braxton Hicks contractions. I'd wake at 4 a.m. to help June harvest vegetables, work the market until noon, then clean houses until I couldn't stand anymore. At night, I'd lie on that moldy mattress, hands on my growing belly, and tell my babies about the life we'd have someday. "Your mom's not broken," I'd whisper. "Just bent a little. But bent things can grow in surprising directions." The first time I felt them move independently, one on the left, one on the right, like they were already claiming their separate spaces. I cried. Not from sadness, but from a fierce protectiveness I hadn't known existed. Week 28 arrived with a heat wave that made the cabin feel like a sauna. I was sorting June's eggs when the first real contraction hit, dropping me to my knees. "That didn't look like Braxton Hicks," June said, already reaching for her keys. "It's too early," I gasped, but my body had other plans. The 20-mile drive to regional medical felt like hours. June ran 3 red lights and created new curse words while I tried to breathe through contractions that shouldn't be happening yet. We screeched into the emergency room just as my water broke, flooding June's passenger seat. "I'm sorry about your truck," I managed between contractions. "Isabel Hart," June said, gripping my hand as they wheeled me away. "You apologize for one more thing and I'll deliver these babies myself in the parking lot." As they rushed me to labor and delivery, I heard her on the phone, rallying people I hadn't even realized cared. Sometimes you have to fall all the way to the bottom to discover you're not falling alone. The NICU was a universe of soft beeps and softer whispers. Ellie came first at 11:47 p.m., 3 pounds and screaming, a fighter from her first breath. Aurora followed at 12:03 a.m., silent and blue, requiring immediate intervention. The nurses moved like choreographed dancers, efficient and calm, while my world split into 2 tiny incubators. 33 weeks is good, Dr. Martinez said, her voice carefully modulated. Their lungs need support, but they're fighters. I reached through the porthole to touch Aurora's impossibly small foot. Her skin was translucent, showing every vessel, every sign of life flowing beneath. Beside her, Ellie's monitors beeped steadily, as if she was already protecting her sister. "I need to fill out the birth certificates," a clerk said, appearing with a clipboard. "Father's name?" The question I'd been dreading. I thought of Nathaniel, probably asleep in his king-sized bed, unaware that his daughters had just entered the world. The vasectomy he'd thought would erase any complications had failed, just like our marriage. "Unknown," I said. The clerk's pen hesitated. "Are you sure? We can—" "Unknown," I repeated, my voice stronger. "Their last name is Hart." June appeared in the doorway carrying a gas station coffee and a grocery bag. "Brought you some real clothes. That hospital gown makes you look like a drunk ghost." She'd been there all night, sleeping in the waiting room chairs, fielding calls from the farmer's market family that had somehow become mine. "The Mennonite ladies sent casseroles," she continued, unpacking the bag. "Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant brought soup. Even cranky Mr. Henderson asked if you needed anything from the store." She paused, studying my face. "You okay?" I looked at my daughters, hooked to machines I couldn't afford, fighting battles I couldn't fight for them. "The bill," I whispered. June, I can't I?" "Already handled. The hospital has a charity program and Pastor Williams is organizing a fundraiser. Turns out having twins in the NICU makes even the gossipy church ladies forget you're a scandalous unwed mother." Aurora's oxygen levels dipped, and 2 nurses materialized instantly, adjusting settings with practiced ease. I watched, helpless, as they worked to help my baby breathe. "She's okay," one nurse assured me. "Just needs a little extra help. Totally normal for 33-weekers. Normal. Nothing about this was normal. I was supposed to be planning nurseries in a Charlotte mansion, not sitting in a rural Tennessee NICU, watching my daughters fight for every breath. But as I sat there in that plastic chair, something shifted. The life I'd planned was gone, scattered like ashes. But ashes fertilize soil. They create new ground for unexpected growth. "Can I hold them?" I asked. "Let's try kangaroo care with Ellie first," the nurse suggested. "Skin-to-skin contact is beneficial for preemies." They placed Ellie on my chest, all 3 pounds of her, and the world narrowed to her heartbeat against mine. She was so light I could barely feel her weight, but her presence was enormous. Her fingers, no bigger than matchsticks, curled around my thumb. "Hi, baby girl," I whispered. "I'm your mom. I know things are scary right now, but we're going to figure it out together." Aurora stabilized enough for me to hold her the next day. Where Ellie was all movement and noise, Aurora was watchful. Her gray eyes, Nathaniel's eyes, I couldn't deny it, studying everything with serious concentration. "You got your dad's eyes," I told her softly. "But you'll get nothing else from him, I promise you that." June visited every day, bringing updates from the market and gossip from town. The story had evolved from poor, abandoned Isabel to that strong heart girl with the twins. It was a small shift, but significant. On day 10, Dr. Martinez sat down beside me with good news. They're gaining weight steadily. If they keep this up, you might have them home by Thanksgiving. Home. The moldy cabin with mice and windows that wouldn't close. I need to find a better place, I said, more to myself than her. Actually, June interjected, about that. My neighbor's moving to Florida. 3-bedroom farmhouse needs work, but it's solid. Landlord would trade rent for repairs and helping with his dairy cows. I don't know anything about cows. You didn't know anything about farming either, but you learned. Besides, cows are basically large milk-producing dogs. You'll be fine. That night, as I sat between my daughter's incubators, I made them a promise. Not the desperate promises I'd made Nathaniel. To be thinner, more sophisticated, more worthy of his world. This was different. I can't give you a perfect family, I whispered, one hand on each incubator. I can't give you a father who shows up, or grandparents who'll spoil you, or the big house I thought you'd grow up in. But I'm going to build you something better. A life where you're valued for who you are, not what you can do for someone else. A world where strong is better than perfect, and kind matters more than rich. Ellie's monitors beeped in what I chose to interpret as agreement. Aurora's oxygen levels held steady, as if she was conserving energy for bigger battles ahead. We're going to be okay, I told them. And for the first time since Nathaniel walked out, I believed it. The farmhouse was a disaster. Peeling paint, sagging porch, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1973. But it had working heat, windows that closed, and no mice. Already a vast improvement. More importantly, it came with June as a neighbor and 5 dairy cows who expected attention twice a day, sick babies or not. This is Mabel, Mr. Holcomb explained, patting a black and white Holstein. She's the lead cow. Respect her and the others fall in line. Disrespect her and you'll be wearing your coffee instead of drinking it. Ellie was strapped to my chest in a carrier while Aurora slept in her car seat nearby. At 2 months old, they were finally home but still needed round-the-clock care. The feeding schedule alone, every 3 hours, sometimes taking an hour per baby, left me perpetually exhausted. You sure about this arrangement? Mr. Holcomb asked, eyeing my sleep-deprived state. We need a home, I said simply. And you need help. We'll figure it out. That became my mantra. We'll figure it out. When Aurora had a reflux episode at 3 a.m. while I was mid-milking, I figured it out, propping her car seat where I could see her while finishing Mabel. When Ellie decided she would only sleep while moving, I figured it out, wearing her while cooking, cleaning, and learning to make cheese from the excess milk. It was June who suggested the farmer's market. You're already making cheese for yourself, she pointed out, watching me strain curds. Might as well make extra to sell. I don't know the first thing about selling cheese. You didn't know the first thing about making it either until YouTube University taught you. Come on, Isabel. That assisted living center bought out my entire vegetable stock last week. People are looking for local food. My first batch of farmer's cheese sold out in an hour. Emboldened, I experimented, adding herbs from June's garden, creating a smoky variety using Mr. Holcomb's ancient smoker. The twins came with me to every market, becoming minor celebrities in their matching carriers. These your girls? Became the standard greeting, usually followed by purchasing whatever I was selling. Sympathy sales, maybe, but money was money. By spring, I'd added yogurt and what I called healing bone broth. Really just the stock I'd learned to make during my nursing days, but marketed with a story about traditional remedies. June suggested I share that story. People don't just buy products, she explained, helping me design labels on her ancient computer. They buy narratives. You're not just some girl making cheese. You're a single mother building a business from scratch. That's American dream stuff right there. So I leaned into it. The label read Heart and Soul Farm Foods, June's idea, with a simple drawing of 2 baby footprints. Cheesy? Absolutely. But it worked. The regional food blogger who discovered us was actually looking for June's heirloom tomatoes. She was a Charlotte transplant, all designer jeans and perfect highlights, reminding me painfully of Nathaniel's world. But when she tasted my lavender goat cheese, the goats were Mr. Holcomb's nephew's contribution to our growing operation, her eyes widened. This is extraordinary. Where did you train? Life, I said, bouncing Aurora on my hip while Ellie gnawed on a teething ring. And YouTube. The blog post went live 2 weeks later. From ashes to artisan. How one mother's loss became Tennessee's gain. The orders started immediately. "We need a commercial kitchen," June announced, spreading spreadsheets across my kitchen table. "And liability insurance, and probably an LLC. I can barely afford diapers. That's why I wrote this grant application." She slid papers toward me. "Rural Women's Business Development Program. Due next week." I stared at the forms. "June, I don't know how to—" "Remember what you told the twins in the NICU? About building them a world? This is how you build it, one form at a time." We worked through the night, babies sleeping in their bouncers, fueled by coffee and determination. The business plan came together slowly. Projections, market analysis, growth strategies. It felt like fiction, like I was writing about someone else's life. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. $25,000 seed money, plus business mentorship and access to a shared commercial kitchen in Nashville. "We did it," I whispered, clutching the letter while tears streamed down my face. "Girls, we actually did it." Ellie responded by spitting up on the letter. Aurora, true to form, slept through the entire celebration. The first time I walked into that commercial kitchen, keys in hand, twins in their stroller, I thought about Nathaniel. Not with anger anymore, but with something approaching pity. He'd been so certain I was nothing without him, just a burden to be shed. But burdens, I'd learned, could become blessings if you carried them right. "This is where Mama's going to work," I told the girls, their eyes wide as they took in the gleaming equipment. "This is where we build our future." The text came that night, the first communication from Nathaniel since the divorce papers were signed. "Heard about your little cheese business. Don't embarrass yourself. You were never meant for entrepreneurship." I looked at my daughters, asleep in their cribs, then at the business cards June had designed. Isabel Hart, founder and CEO, Heart and Soul Farm Foods. I deleted his message without responding. Some seeds were too toxic to let take root. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Heavy cream cardstock that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My name was written in elaborate calligraphy, and even before I opened it, I knew. "Mr. Nathaniel Vaughn and Miss Priscilla Beaumont request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration." Inside, a handwritten note in Nathaniel's precise script. "I hope you'll attend to see what proper choices look like. Consider it a learning opportunity." June found me sitting on the porch steps, invitation in one hand, glass of Mr. Holcomb's blackberry wine in the other. The twins, now 3 years old, were chasing chickens in the yard, their laughter cutting through my fog. "He actually invited you to his wedding?" June snatched the invitation, reading it twice. "The audacity of this man knows no bounds." "Priscilla Beaumont," I said, the name bitter on my tongue. Heiress to Beaumont Cosmetics. Everything I wasn't. Connected, sophisticated, worthy of his world. "You're not actually considering going?" I watched Ellie trip, bounce back up, and resume her chicken pursuit without missing a beat. Aurora hung back, studying the chicken's movement patterns before making her move. "My fighters and my strategist. He made sure the girls have never met him," I said quietly. "Signed away his rights without even asking their names. But someday, they'll ask about their father. And I want to be able to tell them that I faced him one last time, that their mother wasn't a coward." "That's the dumbest thing you've ever said," June replied. "And I've heard you try to convince me that cottage cheese is a valid ice cream substitute, but the seed was planted." Heart and Soul had just landed a contract with Whole Foods. My bank account, while not impressive, was no longer terrifying. And somewhere in the back of my closet hung a single designer dress from my old life. Forest green silk that I'd never had occasion to wear. "If you're doing this," June said after a long pause, "you're not going alone. And you're sure as hell not going looking like some country mouse he can pity." The plan formed over the next 2 weeks. June's cousin owned a vintage Cadillac he rented for special occasions. Another friend, a hairstylist in Nashville, owed June a favor. The dress, miraculously, still fit, though it hung differently on my body that had built a business and carried twins. "Mama, you look like a princess," Aurora breathed the morning of the wedding. "Princess Mama," Ellie agreed, spinning in her own dress, a miniature version June had sewn from leftover silk. The 3-hour drive to Asheville passed in a blur of Disney songs and gas station snacks. The resort was exactly what I'd expected. Sprawling, ostentatious, crawling with old money and new attitudes. I recognized several of Nathaniel's business associates, watched their eyes widen as I stepped out of the Cadillac. The twins flanked me like tiny bodyguards, Ellie chattering about the castle, while Aurora quietly absorbed everything. We swept past the registration table. My name was on the list after all, and into a world I'd once desperately wanted to join. The ceremony space was perfect, of course. Thousands of white roses, crystal everything, a string quartet playing something tastefully classical. I chose seats in the middle, visible but not prominent, and waited. Nathaniel entered first, and for a moment my breath caught. He looked exactly the same. Gray suit, impeccable. Hair precisely styled. That confident stride that once made me feel protected. Now I saw it for what it was. A performance, as carefully orchestrated as this wedding. Priscilla was everything I'd imagined. Blonde, willowy, gliding down the aisle like she was floating. Her dress probably cost more than my annual revenue. She was perfect for him. A matching set of beautiful, empty dolls. "Is that Daddy?" Aurora whispered, her voice carrying in the hushed space. I'd shown them pictures, explained in age-appropriate terms why he wasn't in our lives. But this was the first time they'd seen him in person. "Yes, baby," I whispered back. "He looks boring," Ellie announced, not bothering to whisper. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through nearby guests. Nathaniel's head snapped toward us, and I watched the color drain from his face as recognition hit. Not just me, but two small girls who were unmistakably his. Aurora had his eyes, his jawline. Ellie had his nose, his hair color. The ceremony continued, but the energy had shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Priscilla kept glancing our way, her perfect smile beginning to crack. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, the silence was deafening. "Mama," Ellie said, standing on her chair for a better view. "Why is that lady wearing such a big dress? Is she hiding something?" This time, the laughter was genuine. Even some of Nathaniel's stuffy business partners cracked smiles. I tried to shush her, but the damage was done. The fairy tale was tainted with reality. We left during the reception, after making one strategic pass through the cocktail hour. Long enough for everyone to see us, to notice the girl's obvious resemblance to the groom, to observe that I wasn't the desperate ex-wife they'd probably been told to expect. "Mrs. Hart?" A woman touched my elbow as we headed for the door. I recognized her. Senator Williams, one of Nathaniel's major investors. "I don't believe we've met properly. These must be your daughters." "Yes, ma'am. Ellie and Aurora." She studied them with sharp eyes, then looked back at me. "My granddaughter has special dietary needs. I've been following your company, Heart and Soul. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership for our charity foundation." I handed her my business card, the new ones with raised lettering and everything, and made my escape. In the parking lot, I buckled the girls into their car seats, my hands only shaking slightly. "Did we do good, Mama?" Aurora asked. "You did perfect, baby, both of you." As we drove away, I glimpsed the reception through floor-to-ceiling windows. Nathaniel stood rigid beside his new wife, but his eyes were on the parking lot, watching us leave. For the first time in 4 years, I saw him see me. Not as a burden or embarrassment, but as what I'd become. "Can we get ice cream?" Ellie asked. "Yes," I laughed, surprising myself with how free it sounded. "We can definitely get ice cream." The video went viral before we even made it back to Tennessee. "Local food entrepreneur crashes ex-husband's society wedding," read the headline on the Nashville Scene's social media. Someone had filmed Ellie's commentary about the dress, capturing Nathaniel's expression in high definition. The internet, as always, had opinions. My phone buzzed incessantly as June drove me home from the farmer's market the next week. "You're trending on Twitter," she said, trying not to laugh. #WeddingCrashMom, #SavageToddler. "Oh, this one's good. #FromBurden to Boss." "Please stop," I groaned, sliding lower in my seat. "Can't. This is the best thing that's happened since you accidentally sold cheese to Martha Stewart's assistant. Speaking of which," she held up her phone. "Email from Beaumont Cosmetics' legal team. Subject line, urgent." My stomach dropped. "They're suing me? Let's find out." June pulled over and we read it together. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a request for a meeting. Priscilla Beaumont herself wanted to discuss a potential business arrangement. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a neutral location, a boutique hotel in Nashville. I arrived early, the girls safely with June, wearing my only business suit and the confidence I'd built selling cheese to skeptics. Priscilla swept in 20 minutes late, but somehow made it seem like I was the one off schedule. Up close, without wedding makeup and fairy tale lighting, she looked tired. human, even. I'll be direct, she said, settling into her chair like a queen granting an audience. The wedding was a disaster. Not because of you, though your timing was unfortunate. Because I discovered my new husband has been lying since day one. I said nothing, having learned that silence often prompted more information than questions. He told me his first marriage ended because his wife cheated, said he couldn't have children because of a medical condition. Painted himself as this wounded soul who just needed the right woman to heal him. She laughed bitterly. Imagine my surprise when two little girls who look exactly like him show up at our wedding. I never cheated, I said quietly. I know, I hired an investigator. Also discovered some interesting financial irregularities in his business dealings. Did you know he's been claiming the twins as dependents on his taxes? Despite having no contact and paying no support? The room tilted. He what? Oh yes, also learned about the $10,000 he supposedly gave you. Never happened, did it? He reported it as alimony paid. I need to call my lawyer. No need. I've already handled it. She slid a folder across the table. Consider it my wedding gift to you. Full documentation of his fraud, already filed with the IRS. He'll owe back taxes, penalties, and interest. Should come to about... I opened the folder and nearly choked. $300,000? Give or take. There's more. Several of his investors were at the wedding. They saw the girls, did the math, and realized if he'd lie about something so fundamental... She shrugged elegantly. Trust is everything in business. Why are you telling me this? For the first time, her perfect composure cracked. Because I was almost you. Another year or two and I'd have been discarded just as easily. Men like Nathaniel don't have wives. They have accessories, and accessories are replaceable. She stood, gathering her designer bag. The investigator's report is yours to do with as you please. I've already filed for annulment. Fraud is wonderfully clear grounds. Oh, and Isabel? Your cheese really is extraordinary. I've placed an order for 200 gift baskets for our corporate clients. My assistant will send the details. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and I sat there, staring at the folder. Evidence of years of lies, financial manipulation, and casual cruelty, all documented in black and white. My phone rang. June. You need to get home, now. There's a news van in your driveway. The story broke that evening. Prominent developers' double life exposed. Nathaniel's investors pulled out. The church where he served on the board quietly requested his resignation. The country club revoked his membership pending review of moral character. I refused all interview requests, focusing instead on keeping the girls' routine normal. But normal was relative when their father's face was on the evening news, labeled as disgraced Charlotte developer. Is Daddy in trouble? Aurora asked one evening, looking up from her coloring book. Yes, baby, he made some bad choices. Like when I took Ellie's cookie without asking? Similar, but bigger. She considered this. Will he say sorry? I smoothed her dark hair, Nathaniel's hair. I don't know. Sometimes grown-ups have trouble saying sorry. That's silly, Ellie chimed in. Sorry fixes things. Ms. June taught us that. If only it were that simple. The final blow came 2 weeks later. Nathaniel's company filed for bankruptcy. The house I'd once shared with him went into foreclosure. The BMW he'd been so proud of was repossessed from the country club parking lot, in full view of his former peers. Senator Williams called personally. I wanted you to know that our foundation has approved Heart and Soul as an official vendor. We'll be ordering from you monthly for our nutrition programs. Senator, I appreciate that, but I don't want charity. My dear, this isn't charity. This is business. You provide quality products at fair prices. The fact that you do so while raising 2 delightful young ladies alone just proves you're the kind of entrepreneur we should support. After I hung up, I sat on my porch, watching the girls play in the yard. 4 years ago, Nathaniel had called me a burden, said I'd never fit into his world. He was right. I didn't fit into his world of lies and appearances. I'd built my own instead. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then saw the preview. This is Nathaniel. Against my better judgment, I opened it. You destroyed everything. I looked at my daughters, laughing as they chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. At my house, crooked, but mine. At the Heart and Soul delivery van parked in the drive, ready for tomorrow's orders. I typed back, no, I just told the truth. Then I blocked his number and went to catch fireflies with my girls. The collapse happened faster than anyone predicted. Within 3 months of the wedding disaster, Nathaniel Vaughn went from Charlotte's golden boy to its most notorious cautionary tale. I heard about it in pieces, through June's network of gossip and the occasional news article. His investors didn't just pull out, they sued. Turns out, when you lie about your personal life so extensively, people start questioning your professional integrity too. And when they dig deeper, forensic accountants found 3 sets of books. June read from her phone over morning coffee. 3. Who even has time for that level of deception? I focused on braiding Aurora's hair, trying not to react. The girls didn't need to see their mother gloating over their father's downfall. Even if part of me, the part that remembered being called a burden, felt a vicious satisfaction. "Mama, you're pulling," Aurora complained. "Sorry, baby." I loosened my grip, smoothing the braid. "There, all done." Ellie bounced into the kitchen, already dressed but with her shirt on backward. "Can we go see the new goats today?" "After deliveries," I promised. We'd expanded the farm operation, adding dairy goats to supplement the cheese business. The twins had named them all after Disney princesses, which made for interesting conversation at the farmer's market. My phone rang. Unknown number, Charlotte area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Isabel, this is Margaret Vaughn, Nathaniel's mother." I nearly dropped the phone. In 7 years of marriage, I'd met his mother exactly twice. She'd made it clear, both times, that I was beneath her notice. "Mrs. Vaughn," I managed. "I need to see my granddaughters." The words hung in the air. Ellie and Aurora looked up, sensing the shift in atmosphere the way children always do. "I'm sorry, what?" "I've been unaware of their existence until recently. Nathaniel told me you'd lost the pregnancy. Seeing them at the wedding was quite a shock." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've since learned the truth about many things." I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "He's had 4 years to tell you. Why now?" "Because I'm dying." The words were matter of fact, brittle. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I've just discovered that my son is a stranger to me. But those girls, they're my blood, my legacy. I'd like to meet them, just once." Everything in me wanted to say no. This woman had treated me like dirt, had raised the man who'd thrown me away. But I thought about my own grandmother, how I'd treasured every moment before she passed. "I'll think about it," I heard myself say. "That's all I ask. I'm staying at the Hermitage Hotel in Nashville, room 412. She paused. "Isabel, I'm sorry for all of it." She hung up before I could respond. I told June everything that evening while the girls played with the goats. She whistled low. "That's heavy. What are you going to do?" "I don't know. They have a right to know where they come from, but you don't want them hurt." "Exactly." The decision was taken out of my hands the next day when Margaret showed up at the farmer's market. She looked nothing like the imposing woman I remembered. Cancer had whittled her down to sharp angles and translucent skin. But her eyes, Nathaniel's eyes, Aurora's eyes, were still fierce. She approached slowly, using a cane, designer clothes hanging off her diminished frame. Customers parted, sensing drama. "Grandmother?" Aurora said suddenly, studying a photo book we'd made about families. She looked up at Margaret, then at the picture, connecting dots with that uncanny intuition she'd inherited. Margaret's composure shattered. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm your grandmother." Ellie, never one for subtlety, marched over. "Why haven't we met you before?" "Because I was stupid," Margaret said simply. "And sometimes stupid takes a long time to fix." I watched, ready to intervene, as she slowly sat on a market crate, bringing herself to their eye level. She didn't try to hug them or overwhelm them with emotion. She just talked, answering their questions with surprising honesty. "Is Daddy really in trouble?" Aurora asked. "Yes, he made bad choices." "Why?" Margaret considered this. "I think because I taught him that being important mattered more than being good. That was my bad choice." They talked for an hour while I handled customers, June running interference when needed. By the end, Ellie was showing Margaret her favorite goat, Princess Jasmine, who had an attitude problem, and Aurora was explaining our cheese-making process with scientific precision. Could I see them again?" Margaret asked as she prepared to leave. "I know I have no right, but—" "Sunday dinner," I interrupted, surprising myself. 4 o'clock, bring dessert." Her eyes filled. "Thank you." She came every Sunday after that, for 3 months. She taught the girls piano on our battered upright, told them stories about their ancestors, edited for age appropriateness, and slowly became Mimi instead of grandmother. She also told me about Nathaniel's complete breakdown. "He's living in a studio apartment in Gastonia," she said one evening, after the girls were in bed. "Working at a used car lot, drinking too much. I tried to help, but he won't speak to me. Says I chose you over him. You chose them, I corrected. Your granddaughters. Same thing in his mind. You're all tangled together. His failure, his shame, his loss. He can't separate it. That's his problem, not mine. She smiled sadly. No, it's not. You've built something beautiful here, Isabel. Something real. He's left with nothing but the smoke from all his bridges burning. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in December. She'd arranged everything. The funeral, the will, the trusts for the girls' education. She left Nathaniel the family home, but everything else went to Ellie and Aurora. The last thing she said to me was, raise them to be better. At the funeral, I saw Nathaniel for the last time. He looked hollow, diminished, a ghost of the man who'd once called me a burden. He didn't approach us, didn't acknowledge his daughters, just stood at the graveside like a stranger. As we left, Aurora tugged my hand. Mama, why does Daddy look so sad? Because he forgot that family matters more than anything else. That's silly, Ellie declared. Everyone knows that. From the mouths of babes. That night, I tucked them in and told them stories about their Mimi, about how people can change if they choose to, about how love sometimes comes from unexpected places. They fell asleep holding hands across the gap between their beds, and I thought about Margaret's last gift, not the money, but the reminder that redemption is possible, even if it comes too late. 2 years later, I stood in the Whole Foods regional office watching my products get stocked on the shelves. Heart and Soul Farm Foods had evolved from a desperate survival plan into a multi-state operation. The logo, those 2 tiny footprints, now appeared on products from Virginia to Mississippi. The lavender goat cheese is our top seller in the artisanal category. The regional buyer, Marcus, told me. We're ready to expand to all locations if you can handle the volume. We can, I assured him, thinking of the new facility we'd just broken ground on, funded by Margaret's trust and 3 years of reinvested profits. My team is ready. My team. The word still felt surreal. 12 employees, including June as COO, fancy title for the same job I've always done, she'd laughed. The Mennonite ladies handled most of the baking. Mrs. Chen's daughter ran our social media. Even cranky Mr. Henderson had joined us, turning out to be a genius at logistics. Mama, we're going to be late, Ellie called from the car, where June was watching them. Duty calls, I smiled at Marcus. My daughters have a school presentation. About the business? About perseverance. Their teacher assigned family heroes. I tried not to tear up. They chose me. The drive to school was filled with last-minute practice. Aurora had charts and graphs showing our growth trajectory. Ellie had drawn pictures of the farm, the goats, and what she called Mama's thinking face. Remember? I coached. Speak clearly, make eye contact. We know, Mama, Aurora interrupted. We've been watching you do presentations our whole lives. True enough. They'd attended more business meetings than birthday parties in their early years, sleeping in carriers while I negotiated with suppliers, playing quietly while I learned QuickBooks. Their presentation was perfect, if slightly unconventional. Ellie opened with, our hero is our mom because she was really sad, but then she got awesome. Aurora followed with a detailed explanation of sustainable farming practices and small business development. She could have given up when Daddy left, Aurora said matter-of-factly, but she didn't. She made cheese instead. The teacher looked startled. The other parents shifted uncomfortably, but my girls stood tall, proud of their story. And now, Ellie concluded, she teaches other moms how to be awesome too. That was the part that mattered most. The small business incubator we'd started, offering commercial kitchen space and mentorship to other women starting over. 12 graduates so far, all building their own dreams from ashes. After school, we drove to the old cabin on Sawmill Road. I'd bought it from the landlord last year, unable to let go of the place where we'd started over. The girls ran to the tire swing Mr. Holcomb had hung from the old oak, their laughter echoing across the field. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Hello, Nathaniel. Silence then. How did you know? Lucky guess. I watched Aurora push Ellie on the swing, both of them fearless. What do you want? I saw the Forbes article. From farm to table. How Heart and Soul revolutionized regional food systems. His voice was different, older, tired. Congratulations. Thank you. I also saw the foundation you started, the Margaret Vaughn Fund for Single Mothers. Your mother was a complicated woman, but she understood redemption. The fund honors that. Another long pause. Do they ask about me? The question I'd been expecting for years. Sometimes. I tell them the truth. that you made choices that took you away from us, that people sometimes lose themselves and have trouble finding their way back. That's generous. That's honest. What do you want, Nathaniel? I want to know if there's any chance to meet them, to maybe be some small part of their lives. I've been sober for 8 months, got a real job, accounting for a nonprofit. I'm in therapy. I know I have no right to ask. You're right, you don't. I kept my voice steady, watching my daughters play. But this isn't about rights. It's about what's best for them. I understand. I'll ask them. If they want to meet you, we'll arrange something supervised. Public place, 1 hour. If it goes well, we'll see. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. But my daughters deserve the chance to make their own decisions about their father. I won't take that from them the way you took it from yourself. I hung up and joined the girls at the swing. Hey, loves, we need to talk about something. We sat on the porch steps, the same steps where I'd read his wedding invitation years ago. I explained that their father had called, that he wanted to meet them if they were interested. Aurora, ever analytical, asked 20 questions about logistics and expectations. Ellie wanted to know if he'd finally say sorry. I don't know, baby. He might not. You don't have to decide now. Will you be there? Aurora asked. Every second. Then okay, Ellie decided, but if he's mean, we're leaving. Deal. 2 weeks later, we met at a park in Nashville. Nathaniel looked nothing like the man who'd walked out on us. Humbled, gray at the temples, wearing clothes from Target instead of tailored suits. He stood when he saw us, hands visibly shaking. Ellie, Aurora, I said formally. This is your father. Hi, Aurora said carefully. You look nervous, Ellie observed. Are you scared of us? Terrified, he admitted. You're much more impressive than I imagined. They talked for exactly 1 hour. About school, the farm, their favorite books. He didn't try to buy their affection or make excuses. When Ellie asked why he left, he said, because I was selfish and wrong. As we prepared to leave, Aurora asked, will we see you again? That's up to your mom and you, he said, looking at me for the first time. I'll respect whatever you decide. In the car, the girls were quiet. Then Ellie said, he's not as scary as I thought. Just sad, Aurora added, like Mimi was before she got better. Do you want to see him again? They exchanged one of their twin looks. Maybe, Aurora said, but not too much. We're pretty busy. I laughed, surprising myself. They were right. We were busy. Busy living, growing, building. The man who'd called me a burden had become barely a footnote in our story. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, looking out at the land that had healed us. The old cabin, the barn where I'd learned to milk cows, the commercial kitchen where heart and soul had truly begun. 10 years ago, I'd lost everything. But loss, I'd learned, was just another word for space. Space to grow in unexpected directions. Space to become who you were meant to be. My phone lit up with the text from June. Tomorrow's market is sold out, again. You better be ready for that Today Show interview next week. I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come. From ashes to ivy, climbing toward the light, stronger for having grown through concrete. We're more than ready, I texted back. We've been ready all along. In their room, one of the girls stirred, murmuring in their sleep. I went to check, finding them holding hands across the gap between their beds, just as they had the night Mimi died. My fierce girls, my greatest accomplishment, my reason for everything. I'd promised them a world where they were valued for who they were. Looking at their peaceful faces, I knew I'd kept that promise. And tomorrow, we'd keep building it, one day at a time.
My name is Madison Brooks. I'm 35 years old, a single mother to a teenage son, and until recently I thought my life would always be defined by long, exhausting work shifts and small dreams quietly set aside out of necessity. 5 years ago, I walked away from a broken marriage with nothing but a few hastily packed bags and a terrified 7-year-old clinging to my hand. We started over from nothing in a tiny apartment in Chicago with frugal meals and whispered dreams late at night. I used to believe I would always be someone standing on the outside of glamorous parties, quietly serving food to others, never having a place, truly my own. But then came a wedding, a public humiliation, and a single act of courage from my young son that changed everything. If it were you humiliated in front of hundreds like I was that day, would you stay silent and endure it or stand up the way Noah did? Would you walk away in tears or fight back to defend your dignity? Tell me in the comments if you've ever faced a moment of being looked down upon. How did you respond? Don't go anywhere, because the journey of rising above the pain and reclaiming ourselves has only just begun. This story will show you sometimes from the ashes we can build an entire new sky. The morning light filtered through my kitchen blinds as I carefully poured hot water over the coffee grounds. Steam rose, carrying that familiar aroma that had become my daily companion through countless difficult mornings. I watched the clock. 7:45 a.m. 3 hours until the wedding. 3 hours until I would have to face them again. Mom, can you help me with this? Noah stood in the doorway of our small Chicago apartment kitchen, his lanky 13-year-old frame looking suddenly grown up in the charcoal suit we'd saved for months to afford. My heart swelled with pride and ached with apprehension in equal measure. Let me see that tie, honey. My fingers worked methodically, folding the silk into a perfect Windsor knot. Close up, I could see the anxiety in his eyes, the same shade of brown as mine, everyone always said, the same shade as mine. Not his father's, that had always been my small victory. We don't have to go, I said softly, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. We could stay home, order pizza, watch those Marvel movies you love. Noah looked down at his freshly polished shoes. But I told Dad I'd come. He's expecting me. Daniel? Even after 5 years, his name created a hollow ache somewhere beneath my ribs. 5 years since I'd discovered the texts on his phone. 5 years since I'd packed our belongings into garbage bags while he was at work. 5 years of rebuilding our lives, one difficult day at a time. I know, sweetie, I sighed, ruffling his meticulously styled hair, earning me an exasperated eye roll that made me smile despite everything. And we'll go for you. The truth was, I'd survived 10 years of waiting tables with aching feet, endured countless late shifts so Noah could have a decent Christmas. Weathered the pitying glances from other mothers at school functions. I could survive one wedding, even if it meant seeing Daniel with his perfect new family, even if it meant facing Patricia, my former mother-in-law with her razor-sharp smile and venomous politeness. As I applied mascara in the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. At 35, the fine lines around my eyes had become more pronounced. The constant worry of making rent each month, of stretching groceries until payday, of being both mother and father to a boy entering his teenage years. It all showed on my face in ways no concealer could hide. But beneath it all, something else stirred. A strange, persistent feeling that today would be different, that something was waiting to break open. Whether that would be for better or worse, I couldn't say. The Carson Hotel was exactly as I'd expected, opulent in a way that felt designed to make people like me feel small. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings high enough to create an echo. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of our footsteps as we followed a tuxedoed attendant across the vast lobby. "You must be Daniel's previous family," he said with a calculated pause that made my spine stiffen. "We have a special table for you." Noah's hand found mine, squeezing tight. I squeezed back a silent reassurance. "We've got this. We've always managed." But the moment we approached the assigned table, my stomach dropped. Placed prominently on the table were 2 name cards. Mine read "Single Mother, Waitress," and beside it Noah's card, "Fatherless Son." I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back with burning heat. Noah had seen them too. His hand went slack in mine, and I watched his shoulders curl inward in that protective posture I knew too well. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking. In that moment, something hardened inside me. I reached for the cards, flipped them face down with deliberate calm, and pulled out Noah's chair. "Sit down, honey," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Their handwriting is atrocious anyway." A tiny smile flickered across his face as he sat, and I took my place beside him, arranging my discount rack dress around me with as much dignity as I could muster. Around us, the ballroom filled with laughter and conversation with people who belonged in this world of excess and ease. "Madison, what a surprise to see you here." Patricia Brooks materialized beside our table, resplendent in floor-length midnight blue silk that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her silver hair was swept into an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. "Hello, Patricia." I managed, forcing my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile. "Noah, darling, you look so handsome." She bent to kiss his cheek, leaving a perfect crimson lip print. "Though your tie is crooked, your father could have helped with that if you lived with him." I felt Noah tense beside me, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the tablecloth. For 5 years, I'd taught him to take the high road, to never let them see how deeply their barbs cut. But watching him now, the slight tremble in his jaw, the way he blinked rapidly to control emotions too big for his young frame, I realized with a jolt that my son was growing up and learning the brutal language of family wounds. "His tie is perfect," I said quietly. "I tied it myself." Patricia's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened. "Well, I suppose you must have picked up some skills along the way." She straightened, adjusting her diamond bracelet. "Do enjoy the celebration. Lauren is so happy to be starting a proper family with your ex-husband." As she glided away, I reached for my water glass, needing something to occupy my shaking hands. Across the ballroom, I spotted Daniel, handsome as ever in his tailored suit, laughing with a group of men I didn't recognize. He hadn't even acknowledged our presence. "Mom?" Noah's voice pulled me back. "Are you okay?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and realized with a pang that he was the one trying to comfort me. When had he become so perceptive, so protective? When had my little boy started carrying the weight of my pain alongside his own? "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, straightening the silverware in front of me, just remembering why I don't miss these fancy parties. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Lauren, radiant in designer white, exchanged vows with James Carson, heir to some hotel fortune, and completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface of his perfect day. I kept my eyes fixed on a point just above the floral arrangements, refusing to watch Daniel stand proudly as his sister's man of honor. It was during the reception, after the champagne had flowed freely and the multi-tiered cake had been cut, that everything fell apart. Patricia tapped her crystal glass with a silver spoon, the delicate chime silencing the crowd. She stood elegant and commanding at the center of the head table. As mother of the bride's brother, she began, drawing appreciative chuckles at the convoluted relationship. "I want to thank everyone for joining us on this joyous occasion." I relaxed slightly, thinking perhaps we might escape the evening without incident after all. "And speaking of service," Patricia continued, her gaze finding me in the crowd, "I see we have someone with extensive experience in that area. Madison, dear, would you mind helping our servers? They seem to be falling behind, and I know how comfortable you are in that role." The silence that followed was absolute. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, others gleefully anticipating my humiliation. Beside me, Noah had gone utterly still. "I'm sure it would be just like old times," Patricia added with a benevolent smile that never reached her eyes. "And perhaps you could demonstrate for Noah what his future holds. Like mother, like son, isn't that what they say?" A laugh rippled through the crowd, polite at first, then growing bolder as guests realized they had permission to enjoy the spectacle. I felt each chuckle like a physical blow. My cheeks burned. My throat closed. The room seemed to tilt and narrow until all I could see was Patricia's triumphant face and Daniel's conspicuous silence. I placed my napkin on the table and began to stand, my only thought to get Noah and myself out of this room, out of this hotel, out of this nightmare. But Noah moved faster. Before I could stop him, he was on his feet, weaving through tables, walking directly to the microphone Patricia had just relinquished. At 13, he looked small on that stage, swimming in his new suit, but his spine was straight as he adjusted the microphone to his height. "Please don't laugh at my mom," he said, his voice cracking, but clear enough to carry through the suddenly silent ballroom. My heart lodged somewhere in my throat as I watched my son stand before hundreds of strangers. His thin shoulders squared against their judgment. I wanted to rush to him to shield him from whatever was coming, but something in his posture rooted me to my seat. "My name is Noah Brooks," he continued, gaining confidence with each word. "And that woman you're all laughing at, she works 60-hour weeks so I can have new shoes when I grow out of my old ones. She missed her own birthday dinner last year because Mr. Giannopoulos at the diner needed her to cover a shift, and we needed the money for my science camp deposit." The room had gone deadly quiet. Now I could feel the weight of stares shifting from me to my brave, foolish, wonderful son. When I had pneumonia in 4th grade, she slept on the hospital floor for 3 nights because she couldn't afford to miss work during the day. She still has back pain from it, but she never complains. Patricia stepped forward, her perfect composure fracturing around the edges. "Noah, darling, this isn't the time for—" "I'm not finished." "Grandmother." The formal title sounded like an indictment in his young voice. You know what's funny? Mom never says bad things about any of you. Even after Dad left us for his secretary and you told the court she was an unfit mother, even after you stopped sending birthday cards when I turned 8. Patricia's face had gone ashen. She reached for a nearby dessert tray. Noah, come down now. I've saved you some of that chocolate cake you always liked. I don't want cake, Noah said quietly. I want you to stop pretending we're not good enough. Patricia's smile strained to the breaking point. This is precisely why your father couldn't stay with... I have something else, Noah interrupted, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the sound system with the easy confidence of a digital native. Something you all should hear. My confusion mirrored the expressions around the room. What was he doing? Last week when I stayed at Dad's place, he and Aunt Lauren were talking in the kitchen. They didn't know I was recording. A sick feeling of dread and anticipation twisted in my stomach as Noah pressed play. The tinny sound of Daniel's voice filled the ballroom. Perfect opportunity to put her in her place once and for all. Mother's idea with the name cards is brilliant, and having her serve drinks, priceless. Lauren's laughter followed. James has no idea, of course, he's so straight-laced about family. But once we're married and expecting he'll understand why we need to cut ties completely, I can't have that waitress and her kid hanging around. Speaking of expecting, Daniel's voice lowered conspiratorially. How are you feeling? Morning sickness still bad? Only in the mornings, thankfully. But James thinks we're waiting until after the honeymoon to start trying, so keep it quiet. The recording ended. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, charged with shock and dawning comprehension. At the head table, James Carson had gone completely still, his face drained of color as he stared at his new wife. That's not... Lauren began, but faltered under her new husband's gaze. Noah spoke into the microphone one last time, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. My mom taught me that lying is wrong, that family means having each other's backs. I guess not everyone got that lesson. He stepped down from the stage and walked back to our table, ignoring the eruption of whispers that followed in his wake. When he reached me, I stood and wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight against the storm we'd unleashed. Let's go home, I whispered into his hair. As we made our way toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of the head table. James was removing his wedding ring, his face a mask of controlled fury. Lauren was sobbing, mascara tracking black rivers down her cheeks. Patricia stood frozen, her perfect event shattered beyond repair. And Daniel finally looked directly at me, his expression a complex mixture of anger and something that might have been shame. I turned away. They didn't matter anymore. The taxi ride home passed in stunned silence. Streetlights swept across Noah's face as he leaned against the window, the adrenaline of his confrontation clearly draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I've been saving those recordings, he finally said as we climbed the stairs to our apartment. Ever since Dad and Lauren started planning how to embarrass you, I knew they were going to do something awful. I unlocked our door, the familiar squeak of the hinges welcoming us back to our modest home. A home that suddenly felt like a sanctuary after the hostile territory we'd just escaped. How did you know how to connect your phone to their sound system? I asked, kicking off the painful heels I'd worn for the occasion. Noah shrugged, the ghost of a smile appearing. YouTube tutorial. I laughed then, a startled, slightly hysterical sound that quickly transformed into tears, great heaving sobs that I'd held back for years. Noah wrapped his arms around me, and I felt his thin frame shake with his own silent tears. I'm supposed to be protecting you, I managed between sobs. Not the other way around. We protect each other, he said with a wisdom far beyond his 13 years. That's what family does. We ordered that pizza I'd suggested earlier and changed into our comfortable clothes, me in worn flannel pajamas, Noah in his favorite superhero t-shirt and sweatpants. The fancy outfit that had cost us so much lay discarded on his bedroom floor, unlikely to be worn again. That night marked a turning point. The phone calls began the next morning, first from acquaintances who'd witnessed the spectacle, then from Daniel's lawyer. The recording had crossed some legal line, apparently. Though nothing would come of the threats, James Carson had more resources than the entire Brooks family combined, and his humiliation demanded satisfaction that didn't involve dragging a 13-year-old boy through the courts. Lauren left town before the honeymoon tickets could be refunded. Last I heard, she was living with a cousin in Phoenix, expecting a child and learning to live without family money for the first time in her life. Daniel lost his position at the investment firm where reputation was currency. The divorce papers granting him full custody of Noah were quietly reversed when the judge heard the recording. And Patricia. Patricia sent flowers, yellow roses with a handwritten note. I was wrong about many things. I put them in water, but threw away the card. Forgiveness might come someday, but forgetting never would. Summer faded into fall, and with it came unexpected changes. Mr. Giannopoulos called me into his office one rainy Tuesday, and I went with dread in my stomach, certain that business was down and my hours would be cut. Instead, he offered me the assistant manager position. "After what happened at that wedding, half the neighborhood started coming in just to see you," he explained with his characteristic bluntness. "Nobody stands up to the Brooks family. It's about time someone did." The raise wasn't enormous, but it meant no more double shifts. It meant I could be home when Noah returned from school. It meant a small savings account that grew by tiny increments each month. With this newfound stability came another revelation. I enrolled in night classes at Chicago Community College Nutrition and Restaurant Management. At 35, I was easily the oldest student in most classes, but that bothered me less than I expected. "You're actually good at this," my fundamentals of business professor told me after I presented my case study. "You have real-world experience most students lack." Noah thrived too. The boy who had stood trembling before hundreds of strangers discovered he had a gift for public speaking. He joined the debate team, then ran for student council. His grades improved as the shadow of his father's disapproval lifted. Winter came bringing with it our first truly peaceful Christmas in years. No anxiety about meeting Daniel's exacting standards. No strained politeness as we opened expensive gifts that subtly highlighted our own modest means. Just Noah and me in our small apartment with a second-hand tree and ornaments we'd made together over the years. "Do you think you'll ever get remarried?" Noah asked out of nowhere as we sat on the sofa watching holiday movies, a bowl of popcorn between us. The question caught me off guard. "I haven't really thought about it," I answered honestly. "It's been just us for so long." "I'd be okay with it," he said, eyes still on the television. "If you found someone nice." I studied my son's profile in the soft glow of Christmas lights. The baby roundness was giving way to the sharper angles of adolescence. Soon he'd be looking at colleges, building his own life. The thought brought both pride and a quiet ache. "What about you?" I nudged his shoulder gently. "Any special girls at school?" His theatrical groan made me laugh. "Some things never changed." Later that night, after Noah had gone to bed, I sat alone with my textbooks spread across the kitchen table. My reflection in the window showed a different woman than the one who had nervously applied mascara before the wedding. The lines around my eyes remained, but they seemed less like marks of worry now, and more like evidence of a life fully lived. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "We need to talk about Noah's summer plans." 6 months ago, that message would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. Now I simply set the phone aside. Whatever conversation awaited could happen in the light of day on my terms. I had assignments to complete, a future to build. Spring brought my first semester's final exams and Noah's middle school graduation. He'd been selected to give a speech. No surprise to me, though he pretended to be embarrassed by my tearful pride. "It's not a big deal, Mom," he insisted as we walked home from the ceremony, his diploma clutched in one hand. "I just talked about transitions or whatever." "You brought the principal to tears," I reminded him, linking my arm through his. He was almost as tall as me now, his voice deepening into something that sometimes startled me when he called from another room. "Yeah, well," he shrugged, but I could see the pleased smile he tried to hide. "Mrs. Patel cries at cat food commercials." That evening, as I prepared a celebratory dinner, nothing fancy, just Noah's favorite pasta, he perched on a kitchen stool, watching me with unusual intensity. "What's on your mind, kiddo?" I asked, stirring the sauce. "Have you ever thought about opening your own restaurant?" The question was so unexpected that I laughed. On a waitress's salary, even with the promotion, we're not exactly rolling in startup capital. "But you could," he persisted. "You're getting your degree. You know more about food than anyone, and people like you. They come back to Giannopolis's just to sit in your section." "That's sweet, honey, but restaurants are risky even for people with investors and experience." Noah slid off the stool and opened his backpack, pulling out a folder stuffed with papers. "I did some research," he said, spreading the contents across our small kitchen counter. There's this program for first-time business owners in underserved neighborhoods and grants specifically for single parents. And look, he pointed to a property listing he'd printed from the internet. This place on Dalton Street is available for lease. It used to be a cafe, so all the kitchen stuff is already there. I stared at my son, this child who had somehow become a young man while I wasn't looking, who had taken my offhand comments about someday having my own place and transformed them into a folder of possibilities. Noah, I began, not sure if I should laugh or cry. This is incredible, but just think about it, he said suddenly, shy in the face of my emotion. You're always taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to do something just for you. I pulled him into a hug, marveling at this person I'd raised, this person who had in many ways helped raise me too. I'll think about it, I promised, knowing I meant it. Later that night, after Noah had gone to his room to call friends and I'd cleared the dinner dishes, I opened his folder again. The business plans were naive in many ways, full of 13-year-old optimism and missing key financial details. But beneath the childish handwriting and enthusiastic exclamation points, I saw something solid and true. A path forward. A door opening to possibilities. I hadn't allowed myself to consider. I picked up my phone and did something I'd never done before. I added the property address to my Maps app and scheduled a viewing for the following week, just to look, just to see. As I put the folder away, my fingers lingered on the cover where Noah had written in his meticulous printing, Mom's Place, Est 2025. 5 years earlier, I had fled my marriage with nothing but garbage bags of hastily packed belongings and a terrified 7-year-old. I had believed somewhere deep down that Patricia was right, that I would never amount to more than the woman who brought other people their food, who existed on the periphery of success without ever achieving it herself. But sitting in our small apartment with textbooks on the table and college acceptance letters beginning to arrive for Noah's high school years still to come, I realized we had never been defeated. We had been building quietly and steadily toward this moment when we could finally see the horizon beyond mere survival. I opened my laptop and began to type my own version of a business plan, more realistic than Noah's, certainly, but no less hopeful, no less brave. Outside, Chicago glittered beneath a canopy of stars, the same city that had witnessed our lowest moments, now silent witness to this quiet rebirth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new battles perhaps. But tonight, in this moment of perfect stillness, I allowed myself to believe in the future. Noah saw so clearly, not just survival, victory.
I'm Rachel, a single mom who found out she was pregnant with quadruplets, only to be abandoned 3 months later by the man who swore he loved me. He chose ambition over family. I chose survival. 3 years later, he showed up at a winter gala and came face to face with 4 little faces that looked just like his. And that was only the beginning. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever pushed through for the sake of your family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I saw him across the crowded ballroom. Logan Thorne, my ex-husband. The man who'd walked out on me 3 months after I'd shown him the positive pregnancy test. Rachel, are you okay? My friend Sarah touched my elbow, but her voice seemed to come from underwater. I couldn't answer. I was too busy watching Logan work the room in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, that same confident smile that had once made me weak in the knees. CEO of a renewable energy empire now, according to the whispers that followed him. He'd built his kingdom, just like he'd always dreamed. Without me. Without us. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Ellie's small voice brought me back. I looked down at my daughter, our daughter, in her emerald green party dress. Behind her stood her 3 brothers, Noah adjusting his clip-on tie, Mason trying to sneak another cookie from the dessert table, and Tyler quietly observing everything with those intense eyes that were carbon copies of Logan's. Of course, sweetheart. I bent to smooth her dark curls, the same unruly waves Logan battled with gel every morning of our marriage. Let's find you some juice. But as I straightened, I found myself looking directly into familiar gray eyes. Logan stood frozen 10 feet away, his gaze moving from child to child, his face draining of color with each small face he took in. Rachel, his voice cracked on my name. The twins, Noah and Mason, had his sharp jawline. Tyler had inherited his brooding intensity. And Ellie. God, Ellie was his mother's image reborn, from the delicate nose to the determined chin. Logan. I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. 3 years of single motherhood had taught me to appear calm even when my world tilted off its axis. Are these... He couldn't finish the question. Mommy, who's this man? Tyler, ever protective, stepped closer to me. I opened my mouth to answer, but a manicured hand slipped through Logan's arm. Jessa Williams, the governor's daughter, pressed against his side in a gown that probably cost more than my minivan. Logan, darling, you promised to introduce me to the Manning. Her perfectly outlined lips froze mid-sentence as she registered the 4 small faces staring up at her. Her gaze snapped to mine, calculating. Oh, Logan hadn't moved. He stood there like someone had pressed pause on his life, his eyes drinking in every detail of the children he'd never wanted, the children he'd said would derail his empire building. We should go, I said quietly, gathering my small army. It's past bedtime anyway. Rachel, wait! Logan stepped forward, but I was already shepherding the kids toward the exit. It was nice seeing you, Logan. The lie tasted bitter. Enjoy your evening. As we waited for our coats, I caught Ellie looking back at the tall man still standing where we'd left him, looking like his world had just imploded. Maybe it had. The kids were asleep in our hotel room when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I answered. How did you get this number? Rachel, please, we need to talk. I walked to the window, staring out at Chicago's glittering skyline. The city where we'd met, fallen in love and built dreams that he'd shattered with 5 words. I can't do this anymore. There's nothing to talk about, Logan. 4 kids, Rachel, 4, and you never told you? Anger, hot and familiar, flooded through me. That's rich, really rich. I thought about the 17 letters I'd written, each one harder than the last. The first one's full of hope. Maybe he'd just needed time to process. The middle one's pleading, sending ultrasound photos, begging him to reconsider. The final one's cold and factual. Triplets, joining their surprise sister, early arrival, NICU time, mounting bills. I sent 17 letters to your office, I said quietly. 4 emails to your assistant. 3 voicemails that were never returned. Your lawyer sent 1 response, a check for $50,000 and a note suggesting I handle the situation. I sent it back. Silence stretched between us. His voice was hoarse. Rachel, I never got any letters. Of course you didn't. I laughed, but it came out broken. Just like you never got the voice messages when I was hospitalized at 28 weeks, or when they were born at 32 weeks, fighting to breathe. I remembered those terrifying days in the NICU. 3 tiny bodies in incubators while I held Ellie, born the strongest. My mother sleeping in hospital chairs, being my only support while somewhere in the same city, Logan was building his empire. Triplets, he whispered. And the girl, Ellie came first. The boys were the surprise. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Mason needed heart surgery at 3 months. Noah has asthma. Tyler hasn't spoken a full sentence until he was 2. And every single day, every single struggle, I handled it. Without you. Rachel, if I had known, you would have what? Given up your dreams? Become the father you explicitly told me you never wanted to be? My voice caught. You made your choice, Logan. You chose your company over your family. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Enlighten me. But he didn't answer. And in that silence, I heard everything I needed to know. He'd convinced himself the pregnancy was a problem to be solved, not a life to be celebrated. 4 lives, as it turned out. I need to go, I said finally. We're driving back to Bend in the morning. Bend, Oregon? It's where we live. Where I've built a life for them. A good life, Logan, without you. I hung up before he could respond and turned to find Tyler standing in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. You okay, Mommy? I scooped him up, breathing in his little boy scent of hotel soap and the cookies he'd smuggled to bed. I'm perfect, baby. Let's get you back to sleep. As I tucked him in, he whispered, That man looked sad. Sometimes grown-ups get sad, I whispered back. Will you be sad? I kissed his forehead, thinking of the letter I'd written the night they were born, the one I'd never sent. The one where I'd poured out every fear, every hope, every broken piece of my heart. No, baby, I have you 4. How could I ever be sad? The photo was everywhere by Tuesday morning. Billionaire's secret family? Screamed the headlines. Someone at the charity gala had captured the moment. Logan's shocked face, 4 small children, and me in my department store dress looking like exactly what I was, a small-town single mother in over her head. "Mommy, there's people outside." Noah peered through the living room curtains of our modest Bend home. I didn't need to look. The news vans had been arriving since dawn. Our quiet street, where neighbors still borrowed cups of sugar and kids played until the streetlights came on, was now a circus. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Unknown numbers, reporters offering money for my story, and 3 increasingly frantic calls from Logan that I'd declined. "Kids, we're having a movie day," I announced, closing all the curtains. "Pajamas and popcorn." "But it's a school day," Mason protested. "Special holiday," I forced a smile. "The stay away from crazy people holiday." By noon, someone had found my Facebook, my Instagram, the preschool's parent directory. Comments poured in. "Gold digger saw her chance. Bet those kids aren't even his. Poor Logan, trapped by a money-hungry." I turned off my phone, but the damage was spreading. The preschool called. Perhaps it would be better if the children stayed home for a few days? My boss at the credit union suggested I take some personal time. The grocery store clerk who'd known us for 2 years suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. "Why are those people taking pictures of our house?" Ellie asked from her perch by the window. "They're confused," I said, braiding her hair with shaking hands. "They think we're someone else." But by evening, the narrative had solidified. Rachel Moore, the woman who'd hidden 4 children to extract maximum payment from one of America's most eligible billionaires. They found my college photos, interviewed distant acquaintances, painted a picture of a calculating woman who'd planned this moment. No one mentioned the 17 letters, the nights walking colicky babies alone, the way I'd stretched every dollar, clipped every coupon, worked every overtime shift to keep us afloat. "Turn that off," Mom said, finding me scrolling through the latest article at midnight. "They're calling me a schemer, Mom. Like I planned to get pregnant with quadruplets to trap a man who was already pulling away." She took my phone, set it aside, and pulled me into her arms like I was 5 again. "Anyone who matters knows the truth." "Do they? Even Mrs. Patterson crossed the street to avoid me today. 3 years of play dates and suddenly I'm poison. This will pass." "When?" I pulled away, exhaustion making me raw. "When Logan goes back to his perfect life? When they find another scandal? My kids are being punished for existing, Mom. For existing." The next morning proved me right. I was buckling the kids into the van for a hopeful attempt at preschool when Ellie started crying. "What's wrong, baby?" "I don't want to go. Susie said her mom told her not to play with me anymore. She said we're bad people." My heart shattered. Ellie was 4 years old and already learning that the world could be cruel for reasons she couldn't understand. "You're not bad people," I said fiercely, cupping her tear-stained face. "You're the best people I know, all 4 of you." But my words felt hollow when Noah came home with a bloody nose. "What happened?" I demanded, holding ice to his face while the principal shifted uncomfortably. "There was an altercation. Some older boys were saying things." "What things?" Noah looked up at me, one eye already swelling. "They said we were bastards." "What's a bastard, Mommy?" The principal cleared her throat. "Perhaps homeschooling might be—" "No," I stood, lifting Noah into my arms. "No, we're not hiding. We're not running. We didn't do anything wrong." But that night, after I'd tucked in 4 confused, hurt children, I sat in my kitchen and wondered if I'd been selfish. If my pride, my refusal to disappear completely, had doomed them to this. The universe answered with breaking glass, a brick through the living room window, wrapped in a printout of that photo. "Get out, gold digger," scrawled across it in red marker. I was still sweeping glass when headlights flooded the room. Not reporters this time. A black SUV with tinted windows. Logan stepped out, and for the first time in 3 years, I was actually glad to see him. "What happened?" Logan took in the boarded window, the glass shards I was still finding, my exhausted face. "Your girlfriend's fan club," I said flatly. "She's not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "That doesn't matter. Are you all okay? The kids?" "They're sleeping. Finally." I set down the broom, suddenly aware I was in ratty pajama pants and one of Tyler's finger-painted t-shirts. "What are you doing here, Logan?" "We need to talk. Properly." He gestured to the SUV. "That's my security team. They'll watch the house tonight." "I don't need—" "Rachel." His voice was quiet but firm. "Someone threw a brick through your window. Our children are being harassed. You need help." "Our children?" 2 words I'd never thought I'd hear from him. Fine, talk. He looked around my small kitchen. The crayon drawings on the fridge, the mismatched chairs around a scratched table, the pile of library books about dragons and pirates. His world of glass offices and leather furniture had never seemed further away. I want to know them, he said finally. I want to be their father. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You are their father. Biology doesn't need your permission. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because 3 years ago, you were pretty clear. No kids, no family, no distractions from building your empire. I was wrong. The simple admission hung between us. Logan Thorne, who never admitted fault in anything, sat at my garage sale table saying he was wrong. Great. Good for you. But being wrong doesn't erase 3 years. It doesn't give Noah back the nights he needed breathing treatments and asked why he didn't have a daddy like other kids. It doesn't help Mason understand why he has a scar on his chest from surgery you didn't even know about. It doesn't... I know. He cut me off, pain etched in every line of his face. I know I can't get that back, but I'm here now. Why? I demanded. Because the media found out? Because it's bad for your image? Because they're mine. His voice cracked. Because I saw them. And everything I thought I knew about what I wanted just shattered. Because I haven't slept in 3 days thinking about what I've missed. And you think you can just walk in here, write a check, and play daddy? No? He met my eyes. I think I need to earn it. All of it. Their trust, their love, yours. I don't love you anymore, Logan. I know. He looked away. But you loved me once. Enough to try 17 times to tell me about them. I'm asking for one chance to make this right. It's not my choice to make. It's theirs. Then let me try, please. I wanted to say no. God, how I wanted to throw him out, to protect my babies from the disappointment I knew was coming. But I thought about Tyler asking why other kids had daddies. About Ellie drawing pictures of our family with an empty space she didn't know how to fill. 3 conditions, I said finally. First, you start slow. You earn their trust on their timeline, not yours. Second, the media circus stops now. I don't care what it takes. Third, you don't get to walk away again. If you're in forever. They've had enough abandonment. Agreed. I mean it, Logan. The first time you miss a birthday for a board meeting, we're done. I understand. But he didn't. Not yet. He didn't understand that love wasn't a business deal you could negotiate. That trust, once shattered, came back in pieces so small you might miss them. A small voice from the hallway interrupted us. Mommy? Tyler stood there, dinosaur pajamas and serious eyes, taking in the stranger in our kitchen. Hey, baby, what are you doing up? I heard voices. His gaze never left Logan. Is he the sad man from the party? Logan's intake of breath was audible. I watched him struggle. This man who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, completely undone by a sleepy 3-year-old. Yes, I said simply. Tyler padded over to me, but surprised us both by stopping in front of Logan. He studied him with that intensity that was purely his father's. Are you still sad? Logan's voice was rough. Yes. Mommy says when we're sad, we should use our words. What are your words? I watched the CEO of Thorne Industries kneel on my linoleum floor to look my son in the eye. I'm sad because I missed important things. Because I wasn't here when I should have been. Tyler considered this. Like when I missed show and tell because I had a tummy ache? Something like that. Oh. Tyler reached out and patted Logan's shoulder with one small hand. It's okay. Sometimes we miss things. But Mommy says we can try again tomorrow. The expression on Logan's face nearly undid me. Wonder and pain and hope all twisted together as my son, our son, offered him the forgiveness I couldn't. Logan's media machine worked fast. Within 48 hours, the vans were gone, the articles buried, and a carefully crafted story about private family matters had replaced the gossip. But some things couldn't be fixed with PR. The preschool board has concerns, Mrs. Henderson informed me at pickup, about the disruption to our community. Translation? Rich parents didn't want their kids mixing with mine. I was composing my resignation email that night when Logan called. Don't quit your job. How did you... I stopped. Never mind, and it's none of your business. I've been reviewing some financial documents. Can we meet? Bring your laptop. Logan, I don't need... Please, this isn't about us. Something's wrong. The urgency in his voice made me agree. Mom watched the kids while I met him at a small cafe downtown, my ancient laptop bag bumping against my hip. You look tired, he said as I slid into the booth. 4 kids and a full-time job will do that. I opened my laptop. What's this about? He pushed a folder across the table. Financial statements, account records, transaction logs, all with his company's letterhead. Someone's been stealing from me. 4% every month, like clockwork, transferred to shell companies. It took your situation for me to start really looking at who has access to what. And you're telling me because? Because you have a finance degree. Because I trust you. Because... He paused. Because the transfer started 3 months after you left. My fingers stilled on the keyboard. You think someone knew about the pregnancy? The amounts, Rachel, they match. Almost exactly what it would cost to raise 4 kids annually, divided by 12. I stared at the numbers, my mind racing. Someone was setting aside money for us? Or making it look like I was secretly supporting you? If this came out wrong? He didn't need to finish. It would look like hush money. Like I'd been paid off all along. Jessa, I breathed. Your girlfriend has access? She's not my girlfriend, he said automatically, then nodded. She's on the board, family connections. We worked in silence for an hour, my rusty skills coming back as we traced payment after payment. The shell companies led to Panama, then Cyprus, then back to a consulting firm in Chicago. There, I pointed at the screen. That firm, they invoice your company for renewable energy consulting, but look at their registration. They were incorporated the week after I left. Logan's phone buzzed. A text from Jessa. Where are you? The Robertson deal needs your signature tonight. The Robertson deal, I said slowly. Logan, check if any of these suspicious transfers happened right before major acquisitions. His face darkened as he pulled up the data. Every single one. Someone's been using insider information to make it look like you were paying me for silence while actually funding their own investments. I closed my laptop. You need a forensic accountant and a lawyer who isn't on your company's payroll. You could do it. I'm a credit union teller, Logan. This is way above my, You just unraveled in an hour what my entire finance team missed for 3 years. He leaned forward. I'll pay consulting rates, triple your current salary. I don't want your money. Then do it for them. His voice was quiet. Whoever's doing this won't stop at financial fraud if they think we're getting close. Those media leaks, that brick through your window, what if it wasn't random? The thought chilled me. Someone systematically stealing from Logan was one thing. Someone willing to hurt my children to cover it up was another. I'll think about it. Rachel, I said I'll think about it. I stood to leave, then turned back. And Logan, that sad man comment Tyler made, he wasn't wrong. You look miserable. Success isn't what I thought it would be. No, I agreed. It never is. I drove home to find Mom teaching the boys to make cookies while Ellie painted at the kitchen table. Normal, chaotic, perfect life. The life someone might be willing to destroy to keep their secrets. That night, I pulled out my old finance textbooks and started reading. Not for Logan, not for the money, but because someone had used my children as pawns in their game, and I was done letting others write our story. By morning, I'd found 3 more suspicious patterns. By noon, I'd sent Logan a 12-page analysis. By evening, he was at my door with a contract and something I didn't expect. Humility. I need you, he said simply, and not just for this. The kids aren't home, I said, not letting him in. I know. I'm not here for them. I'm here for you. To say I'm sorry. To say I was a coward. To say that seeing you again, seeing what you've built despite everything I put you through, Rachel, you're extraordinary. I'm a mother, I corrected. We do what we have to. No. He shook his head. Not every mother could have done what you did. Not everyone would have raised them to be kind enough to comfort a stranger who hurt their mom. You did that. You made them who they are. I wanted to stay angry. It was easier than the alternative, but exhaustion won. Fine, I'll consult, but we keep it professional. Of course. But as he handed me the contract, our fingers brushed, and I saw the flash in his eyes that said professional was the last thing on his mind. 3 months into our uneasy partnership, the case against Jessa and her co-conspirators was solid. The FBI had gotten involved, assets were frozen, Logan's company was cleaning house, and somehow, in between depositions and spreadsheets, Logan had become part of our lives. It started small. Pizza night after a late financial review session, helping Tyler with a puzzle while I put Ellie to bed, teaching Noah about renewable energy with Lego models, showing Mason card tricks during his breathing treatments. He's not so bad, Mason announced one evening as Logan's car pulled away. Who's not so bad? I asked, though I knew. Mr. Logan, he said maybe I could see his office sometime, the one with the windmills. My children were falling for their father, and I couldn't stop it. Worse, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Mom, you're being stupid, my mother said over coffee the next morning. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. And more importantly, he looks at those babies like they're his entire world. He left us, Mom. And he came back. Because he had to. Because of the media. Bullshit. Mom never swore, so it hit hard. He came back because he saw what he lost. People make mistakes, Rachel. The question is whether they learn from them. I wanted to argue, but Ellie interrupted, running in with a flyer. Mommy, the spring show is next week. Can I be a butterfly? Of course, baby. I read the parent information. It says here families are invited as, can Mr. Logan come? Please? He's family, right? Kinda? My 4-year-old's hopeful face gutted me. When had Logan become someone she wanted at her events? I don't know if he'll be free, sweetheart. Can we ask, please? Which is how I found myself texting Logan about a preschool production of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, while he was probably in board meetings determining the fate of millions. His response was immediate. Wouldn't miss it. What does she need? The night of the show, I was a nervous wreck. Other parents still whispered, though the scandal had mostly died down. Logan had said he'd come straight from the airport. A Tokyo deal had run long. Where is he? Ellie kept peeking out from behind the curtain. He promised. I'm sure he's trying, baby. But I was already steeling myself for her disappointment. This was why I'd protected them. This was why... Sorry. Logan rushed in just as the lights dimmed, still in his business suit but carrying a bouquet of butterflies made from tissue paper. Traffic from the airport was brutal. He slid in next to me, bringing the scent of his cologne and something else. Desperation? You made it, I whispered. I promised her. His eyes found Ellie on stage, already beaming. I'm done breaking promises to my kids. The show was objectively terrible in that way all preschool productions are. Off-key singing, forgotten lines, one kid who just stood there picking his nose. It was perfect. When Ellie's big moment came, the butterfly emerging from the cocoon, she spotted Logan in the audience and shouted, Daddy, look, I'm flying! The entire auditorium went silent. My heart stopped. Logan's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the music. Then he stood up, right there in the middle of the show, and started clapping. That's my girl! Look at those wings! Other parents stared. The music teacher looked flustered, but Ellie glowed brighter than the stage lights, and one by one, people began clapping too. I'm sorry, Logan whispered as he sat back down. I didn't mean to... Shut up, I said, but I was fighting tears. Just shut up. His hand found mine in the dark, and I didn't pull away. After the show, as kids swarmed for cookies and juice, Logan knelt to Ellie's level with his tissue paper butterflies. These are for the best butterfly I've ever seen. She threw her arms around his neck. I knew you'd come. Mommy said you might be busy, but I knew. Over her head, Logan's eyes met mine. The question in them was clear. Later, after the kids were in bed, we sat on my back porch watching the stars. She called me Daddy, he said quietly. Yeah, is that okay? I thought about 3 years of single motherhood, of 17 unanswered letters, of the pain and struggle and loneliness. Then I thought about Tyler's acceptance, Mason's excitement about windmills, Noah's proud announcement at school that his dad was saving the planet, and Ellie's absolute faith that he'd show up. You'll have to earn it every day, I said finally. Being their father isn't a title, it's a verb. I know. He turned to face me fully. What about us, Rachel? What do I need to do to earn a second chance with you? I don't know if you can, but you don't know that I can't? I looked at this man who'd shattered me, who'd walked away from everything we'd built, who'd chosen ambition over family. But I also saw the man who'd flown back from Tokyo for a preschool show, who'd stood up in a crowded auditorium to applaud his daughter, who'd been learning my children's hearts one bedtime story at a time. I don't know anything anymore, I admitted. Then let me show you. No pressure, no expectations, just let me try. A shooting star streaked across the Oregon sky. Ellie would say it was a sign. Tyler would want to know the science. Noah would make a wish. Mason would ask if we could catch it. Okay, I whispered. But Logan, if you hurt them again... I won't. His voice was fierce. I won't hurt any of you again. We sat in silence after that, watching the stars and pretending we couldn't feel the gravity pulling us back together. The trial was over. Jessa and 2 board members were facing federal charges. Logan's company had weathered the storm. The media had moved on to newer scandals. And somehow we'd become a family. Not all at once. Not easily, but in small moments. Logan teaching Noah to ride a bike, braiding Ellie's hair for dance class, staying up all night when Tyler had nightmares, holding Mason through an asthma attack that sent us racing to the ER. We need a vacation, Logan announced one evening, watching the kids attempt to build a blanket fort that defied physics. We don't do vacations, I said automatically. Too expensive. Well, we do now. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos of a beach house in Newport. 2 weeks. The kids can build sandcastles, we can relax, and maybe— He paused. Maybe we can figure out what comes next. Logan? As friends, he added quickly. Or whatever this is, I want time with all of you. Without work, without drama. Just us. The kids, of course, lost their minds with excitement. 2 weeks at the beach was beyond their wildest dreams. Watching them pack, Ellie insisting on bringing all 17 of her stuffed animals, Tyler carefully selecting just the right books. I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Newport was magic. The kids ran wild on the beach, building elaborate sandcastles that Logan helped engineer with surprising precision. We ate ice cream for breakfast and stayed up late looking for shooting stars. For 2 weeks, we were just a family on vacation. I could get used to this, I admitted one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Then let's get used to it, Logan said simply. It's not that simple. Why not? I gestured at the kids playing in the waves. Because they need stability. Because vacation isn't real life. Because you're scared. I turned to look at him. Of course I'm scared. You broke my heart, Logan. You walked away when I needed you most. I know. He moved closer, not touching, but near enough that I could feel his warmth. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you'll let me. The rest of your life? Rachel. He turned to face me fully. I've spent 3 years building an empire. And for what? To come home to an empty penthouse? To eat dinner alone? To wake up wondering what our kids learned today, what made them laugh, what they dreamed about? Logan, I love you. The words hung between us like suspended breath. I never stopped. I was just too stupid and scared to admit it. I love you, and I love our children, and I want to come home to chaos and noise and Lego blocks on the floor. I want Tyler's intense questions and Mason's terrible jokes and Noah's science experiments that might burn the house down. I want Ellie's dance recitals and art that looks like nothing but means everything. You're describing being a parent, not to— I want you, Rachel. His voice dropped. I want to wake up next to you. I want to argue about grocery lists and whose turn it is to do bedtime. I want to watch you do that thing where you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. I want to kiss you goodnight and good morning and just because it's Tuesday. Logan, please. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me try. To let me prove that I'm not the man who walked away anymore. That I can be the partner you deserve, the father they need. I looked at our children, now collecting shells as the sun sank lower. 4 little miracles I'd never expected, never planned for, but couldn't imagine life without. What if you change your mind? What if the company needs— I'm stepping back. He said it so casually, like he wasn't discussing walking away from everything he'd built. Not retiring, but restructuring. Working from home more, being present. You can't just— I can. I did. The papers are already signed. He reached out, not quite touching my hand. I want to coach Little League and attend parent-teacher conferences. I want to help with homework and be there for sick days. I want to be the man you fell in love with before I lost my way. That man doesn't exist anymore, I whispered. No, he agreed. But maybe this one is better. This one knows what it's like to lose everything that matters. This one won't make the same mistake twice. Ellie ran up then, shells spilling from her bucket. Mommy, Daddy, look what I found. She'd been calling him Daddy for weeks now, and each time I saw it hit him like a physical blow of joy. Beautiful, baby, I said, but my eyes were on Logan. Are you crying, Mommy? She peered at me with concern. Happy tears, I assured her. Oh, good. Daddy, why is Mommy having happy tears? Logan knelt in the sand, pulling her close. Because sometimes grown-ups remember how lucky they are. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found Logan on the deck, staring at the ocean. I can't promise it'll be easy, I said. He turned, hope blooming across his face. I don't want easy. I want real. We take it slow. The kids come first. Always. Always. And if you ever make me regret this. He crossed to me in 2 strides, cupping my face in his hands. I won't. I swear to you, Rachel. I won't. I haven't said yes to anything yet, I pointed out. but my hands were already fisting in his shirt. But you haven't said no. I thought about the long road that had brought us here. The pain, the growth, the impossible journey of two people finding their way back to each other. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Real life would intrude. But tonight, no, I whispered. I haven't said no. He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I might disappear. And maybe I would have, 3 years ago. But the woman I'd become, the mother I'd grown into, she was stronger than that scared girl who'd been abandoned. When we pulled apart, I saw our future stretching out like the ocean, vast and uncertain, but no longer navigated alone. 1 year later, I stood in my office at the Thorn Foundation, reviewing grant applications for single-parent support programs. It wasn't what I'd planned when I'd gotten my finance degree all those years ago, but it was exactly where I needed to be. Knock, knock. Logan. Logan peered around the door. Ready for lunch? 5 more minutes. This proposal from the Portland shelter is amazing. He came in, perching on my desk like he always did. Approve it, whatever they need. You can't just approve everything. Oh, sure I can. It's my foundation. He grinned. Well, ours? We're not married, Logan. Yet. It was an old argument. Comfortable now. We'd get there eventually. For now, this was enough. Building something together that mattered. Kids get off okay this morning? I asked, signing the approval. Tyler insisted on double-checking everyone's backpacks. Noah forgot his science project again. Mason tried to convince me that cookies are a breakfast food. And Ellie... He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo. Ellie did this to my presentation materials. His serious renewable energy slides were covered in butterfly stickers. I think it's an improvement, I laughed. The board of directors didn't agree, but he was smiling. Although one of them did ask if I was taking family portraits for Christmas cards this year. Are we? I thought we might. He pulled out a familiar envelope. But first, I thought you should see this. I recognized my handwriting immediately. The letter I'd written the night the triplets were born, when I was drowning in hormones and fear and love. The one I'd never sent. Where did you... Your mom gave it to me. She thought it was time. He held it out. I haven't read it. It's addressed to me, but I wanted you to decide if I should. I took the envelope, tracing my younger self's desperate handwriting. Inside were all the words I'd been too proud to send, too hurt to voice. All the love and anger and hope poured onto paper in the dark hours of a NICU night. I don't remember what I wrote, I admitted. Then maybe we should read it together. I opened it slowly, unfolding pages soft with age and tears. Logan, they're here. 3 boys, joining their sister. They're so small, too small, but they're fighting. Like their mom, you'd say. Or maybe like their dad, too stubborn to quit. I named them without you. Tyler James, because you always loved that name. Noah Michael, after your grandfather. Mason Alexander, because it sounded strong, and he'll need to be strong. They have your eyes, all of them. Ellie has your mother's nose. Tyler already furrows his brow like you do when you're thinking. Noah has your long fingers. Piano hands, my mom says. Mason has your smile. Rare, but brilliant. I hate you right now. I hate that you're not here to see the nurse teaching me to hold 2 at once. I hate that you won't see their first smiles, first steps, first words. I hate that when they ask about their father, I won't know what to say. But I love you too. God help me, I still love you. And I see you in them, and it breaks my heart and puts it back together all at once. I won't send this. You made your choice. But I needed to tell someone that despite everything, I'm grateful. You gave me them. 4 pieces of my heart walking around outside my body. And maybe that's enough. Maybe someday they'll find you. Maybe you'll see what you missed. Maybe you'll understand that love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about showing up, especially when it's hard. Or maybe not. Maybe this is our story. Me and them against the world. Either way, I forgive you. Not for you, but for me. For them. Because they deserve a mother who isn't bitter, who doesn't carry anger like armor. Be happy, Logan. Build your empire. Change the world. Just know that in a small hospital room in Oregon, your children are changing mine. Forever yours, even when I wish I wasn't, Rachel. Logan's hands were shaking by the time we finished reading. Tears tracked down his face. You forgave me before I even knew what I'd lost, he whispered. I forgave you for them. It took a lot longer to forgive you for me. And now, I looked around my office, pictures of the kids everywhere. A drawing from Ellie taped to my computer, Tyler's latest book report proud on my shelf. Through the window, I could see the playground Logan had insisted on building for the Foundation's childcare center. Now I'm grateful, I said simply, because our story, messy as it was, led us here. He kissed me then, soft and sure, tasting of promise and redemption. Daddy, Mommy! 4 voices chorused from the hallway. We're here! Early release day. Logan groaned against my lips. I forgot. You didn't forget. You just hoped I did so you could be the hero picking them up. Guilty. The door burst open and our chaos tumbled in. Stories about school, demands for snacks, Ellie showing off a new dance move, Tyler asking about the Foundation's environmental impact. Family selfie, Mason demanded, pulling out the phone Logan had finally trusted him with. We crowded together, Logan and I in the back. 4 beautiful faces pressing close. The photo would be blurry, someone's eyes would be closed, and it would be perfect. Are we going home now? Noah asked. I looked at Logan, at our children, at the life we'd built from the ashes of what we'd lost. Yeah, baby, I said, we're going home. And we were. All of us, finally, home.
Damn it, I should have walked out the moment they started laughing. I'm Lara, 34, a single mom, the family disappointment. But what they didn't know was that the night they turned me into a joke was the night I flipped the whole table and brought with me a secret that could burn down everything they ever built. I never imagined that humiliation could come wrapped in silk, champagne, and laughter as sweet as syrup. But today, at my sister's wedding, I tasted it fully, and it burned all the way down to my heart. I sat in the 3rd row, far to the side, trying to make myself as small as possible in the navy blue dress I'd rented from a discount shop near my apartment. It was the only one I could afford after paying last month's rent. My hands clutched a glass of water. No champagne for me, partly because I don't drink, and partly because I didn't want to give myself any excuse to lose control. Luca sat next to me, my precious 8-year-old boy, in a tiny suit I'd saved up for over 2 months to buy. He swung his legs and his eyes sparkled as he took in the lavish room filled with white roses and shimmering lights. Mom, are these lights like the ones in the movies? He whispered, grinning from ear to ear. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, like falling stars, right? He nodded excitedly, eyes still fixed on the glittering ceiling. I turned back to the wedding hall, where Vivian, my younger sister, was walking in like a movie star on the red carpet. Her golden hair curled in soft waves over her shoulders, the pure white gown stitched with exquisite lace, her face flawless with perfect makeup. Everyone watched her, and I couldn't blame them. Vivian was always the center of attention, always the chosen one. I bit my lip. What was I doing here? I'd asked myself that at least 5 times since stepping into the venue. Was I foolish to think today might be the day my family saw me differently? Was I naive to hope that, just this once, Mom would look at me as part of the family pride? Are you having fun? I asked Luca softly. He turned to me, face glowing. So much fun, Mom. Aunt Vivian looks just like a princess. I chuckled faintly. Yeah, she's always been a princess, hasn't she? My heart twinged. Maybe I shouldn't have come. Maybe I should have declined the invitation. But Luca was so excited, and part of me wondered if, after all these years of being pushed to the sidelines, this time, just maybe, I'd be allowed inside the circle. I had prepared carefully, did my own hair in the bathroom mirror, put on some faded pink lipstick, wore a pair of tarnished silver earrings. I didn't want to stand out. I just didn't want to be remembered as the eyesore in someone else's perfect day. When Vivian passed by on her way to the stage, she glanced at me, her gaze briefly resting on Luca, then pausing for a second. Oh, you really came. He's grown so fast, she said, her voice neither warm nor cold, then walked on as if we were 2 acquaintances at best. No hug, no touch, no questions asked. I squeezed Luca's hand gently. He was staring at Vivian with admiration. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was never really a part of this family. The violin began to play a classical piece I vaguely remembered from some wedding movie. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, their smiles sparkling like crystal under the soft golden light. I quietly took a tissue and wiped the smudge of lipstick off the rim of my glass. I told myself, stay calm, pretend you're just a spectator at a play. No one really sees you here. But then, the MC's voice rang out, announcing the speech segment. My heart started to beat faster. I didn't know why, but a strange anxiety crept in. Vivian took the microphone, the stage lights making her gown glow like a constellation. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice smooth and sweet, like aged wine. "Today is the happiest day of my life." Luca leaned over and whispered, "Mom, do you think Aunt Vivian will talk about you?" I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened. That innocent question pulled me back to the present moment. I turned to him, stroked his hair, and smiled as best I could. Maybe she will. Maybe I was hoping for too much. Maybe I was still that same foolish little girl who thought if she tried hard enough to be good, Mom would smile at her the way she always did at Vivian. My eyes unconsciously searched the crowd for my mother. She was laughing brightly, clinking glasses with her friends, not once glancing in my direction. A storm of emotions swelled in me, half hope, half dread. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and all it would take was one sentence for me to fall. I'm a single mother living on the western edge of the city, where old apartment buildings creak when the wind blows, and the shared courtyard barely grows anything but a few potted cacti because there's hardly any sunlight. Our apartment has 2 bedrooms, one for Luca, one for me, which also doubles as the living room. It's not big, but it's clean. I painted the walls a soft cream yellow last year by myself. It took 2 weeks since I could only work on it after my evening shifts. Every morning, I wake up at 5 a.m. I make breakfast, get my son's clothes ready, and take Luca to school before heading to the cafe, where I work the morning shift from 6:30 to 11. It's a small place, mostly frequented by office workers. I know all the regulars by heart, who wants their cappuccino unsweetened, who needs a double espresso on Mondays. After my shift, I rush home, take a quick shower, eat whatever I can find, and try to nap a little if Luca doesn't need help with his homework. At night, I work the reception desk at a small hotel, the kind that hosts wandering backpackers and young couples escaping the city's chaos. Sometimes someone forgets their key card or asks how to order midnight snacks. I always respond gently, patiently, even when my eyes sting from exhaustion. That's how I live. Not glamorous, not successful by anyone's standards, but enough to survive. And more importantly, I feel at peace. Maybe it's because I've learned not to expect anything from anyone. When I got pregnant at 25, Luca's father disappeared overnight. No goodbye, no explanation. Just me and a blurry black and white ultrasound image I've kept ever since, a reminder that there once was a promise, even if it never became real. My family did not welcome the baby. My mother, Judith, looked at me like I was a stain. My sister turned away. I used to think there would be a hug, "Do you need anything?" Or at least a look that said she understood. But no, they didn't ask. They whispered behind my back. And I, belly growing bigger by the day, learned to go to the market alone, find cheap clinics, and sew old clothes into diapers for my child. Can I really be a mom? I asked myself that question the first night Luca cried until dawn. I didn't have an answer. I only knew that I had to be. Not for anyone else, but for the tiny eyes searching for warmth in mine. And I swore he would never feel abandoned. But no matter how hard I tried, in my mother's eyes, I was always a failure. She never said, "I'm proud of you," never asked what Luca needed. Instead, she'd send pictures of Vivian on magazine covers, boast about her penthouse, and say, "If only you could make me as proud as your sister does." I once dreamed that someday they'd understand, that I wasn't a shadow, not just the woman raising a child alone, but a person capable of love, sacrifice, and standing tall after falling. Maybe that's why I came to Vivian's wedding, even though I wasn't on the bridesmaid list, even though they misspelled my name on the invitation, even though I had to do my hair in the bathroom while Luca practiced tying his shoelaces. I hoped, if only 1 in a million, that maybe they'd changed. "Luca, are you cold?" I whispered as the icy air from the vent brushed past us. He shook his head, then leaned against my shoulder. "I'm happy, because today we get to be a family with everyone else, right, Mom?" I gently squeezed his hand. "Yes, a family. Even though I know, not everyone who shares your blood knows how to love." And in that exact moment, When laughter echoed from the center tables and Vivian's eyes swept past me again as if I never existed, I realized, today, once again, I had to brace myself to weather that all-too-familiar wave, the one called being forgotten. The wedding reception began at 6 p.m., just as printed on the invitation. A cream-colored card embossed with gold lettering where my name was written as Lana. I'd considered correcting it with a pen, then decided it wasn't worth the trouble. It didn't matter. The music started. Soft, elegant. Waiters in black and white uniforms glided between tables like dancers in a well-rehearsed ballet. Each table was draped in deep red velvet, lit by expensive scented candles, and topped with menus so glossy they looked almost unreal, luxuries far removed from the world I lived in. Luca was mesmerized by the tiny bread rolls wrapped like little gifts. "Mom, these are so good. Can I ask for more?" I laughed. "Eat slowly, honey. The main course is coming soon." He nodded eagerly, his eyes glowing. Sitting beside me, he looked like a child watching a fairy tale unfold, completely unaware that his mother was clenching every muscle just to stay composed. I didn't know why, but ever since Vivian had stepped onto the main stage with a champagne glass in hand, I had a strange, heavy feeling, as if something in the air was about to detonate. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" the MC said with a polished smile. "It's time for the toasts." Applause echoed across the room. I pressed my lips together and gripped the edge of my dress to stop my hands from shaking. The first to speak was the groom's best friend, a tall guy with slicked-back hair, who told a few college-era stories about Callum. People chuckled politely, glasses clinked. The mood remained warm, respectful. I exhaled quietly, trying to convince myself, maybe I'm just being paranoid. Then Vivian stepped forward. The entire room seemed to go silent, like someone had turned life's volume down to a whisper. She stood center stage, waves of golden hair cascading over her shoulder, her glittering gown hugging every curve. The microphone looked made for her hand. Every gesture was perfect, every gaze directed to her. "Thank you all so much for being here today," Vivian began, her voice soft and mesmerizing. "Truly, this is the happiest day of my life." Luca squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, do you think she's going to talk about you now?" I smiled faintly, unable to answer. A part of me wanted to believe she would. Another part was afraid. Vivian continued, recounting her fated love with Callum, their magical first meeting, and the serendipitous moments that felt written by the universe. Her voice was velvet, heads nodded, everyone smiled. I began to relax. Maybe today wouldn't be so bad after all. But then her tone shifted, gentler, but with a sharper edge. "And of course," Vivian said, her lips curling into a smile that was hard to interpret, "I can't not mention my sister, Laura." I froze. All eyes turned to me. I gave a small, polite nod, reflexive, like armor. "She's a strong woman," Vivian continued, looking at the audience, but never once making eye contact with me. "She's raised her child all on her own. No husband, no partner, no support except for the kindness of occasional babysitters." A chuckle burst out from one corner of the room. I went rigid. Vivian laughed along. "Honestly, that's something to admire. A single mother, abandoned, and yet here she is tonight. That's resilience, isn't it?" Laughter erupted, this time louder, unfiltered, not the kind you offer out of politeness, but the kind saved for a really good joke. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Luca turned to me, eyebrows furrowed. "Mom, why are they laughing?" I swallowed hard, staring at the table. I couldn't answer, but it didn't end there. From the head table, Judith, my mother, leaned toward the people beside her and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "She's used goods, but at least the packaging's still intact." I felt as if ice water had been dumped over my entire body. Another wave of laughter. Sharper. Crueler. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. My eyes stared blankly. My throat dried out. I was being stripped bare under the lights, the music, in the middle of my own sister's celebration. "I don't understand," Luca whispered, his voice trembling. "Why are they saying that about you?" I turned to him, clutching his hand like it was the only thing anchoring me to this earth. I'd thought I was used to how they treated me, but not in front of my child. Not where he had to see his mother being humiliated. I glanced around the room, searching for a kind look, someone who might silently stand with me. My grandfather stared at his plate. My cousin was glued to her phone. No one met my eyes. No one stood. And that was the moment I knew. Everything was about to change. Not because of me, but because of the little boy beside me, staring with wet, confused eyes. I placed a hand on the table, ready to rise. But just then, at the head table, a chair scraped loudly across the tiled floor. Callum, the groom, was standing up, his face pale. His eyes weren't on Vivian or Judith. They were locked, straight on me. I don't quite remember how Callum stood up. All I remember is the sound of his chair scraping back, sharp, sudden, like a tear ripping through the air, slicing right across the rising tide of laughter. I looked at him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't indifferent either, his eyes locked onto mine, as if searching for something in the crowd, and in that moment, my entire body froze. I couldn't breathe. My hand was still gripping Luca's. His fingers trembled in mine. I could feel his tiny heartbeat pulsing through his skin, and I knew this wasn't just my shame anymore. I wasn't the only one carrying this weight. I was about to stand. I wanted to leave. I had to leave. I couldn't let Luca sit there another second, watching his mother be mocked like a circus act, by the very people who shared her blood. I nudged my chair back. My legs shook so badly I thought a strong gust might knock me over. But still, I rose. Somewhere nearby, I heard a whisper. Is she really going to leave? I didn't care. I reached for Luca's shoulder and whispered, "Let's go, baby." He looked up at me, eyes red and watery, and nodded. I had just turned to leave when Callum's voice rang out, not loud, but powerful enough to echo across the room. "Lara, don't go." I stopped. No one moved. No forks clinked. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. I slowly turned back. Callum stood there, at the head table, holding the microphone. His eyes never left mine. His voice was low and steady. "We can't call this family if cruelty is considered part of the ceremony." I heard someone exhale sharply. A faint gasp rippled through the guests. Judith squinted, her expression tightening. Vivian clutched her champagne glass, her perfect face beginning to fracture. And me? I just stood there, one arm around Luca, the other hanging limp, suspended somewhere between reality and a dream. Was this real? Was someone actually standing up for me? No. I could feel the ground beneath my feet, the dull ache in my chest. This was real. I glanced at Luca. He was staring at Callum, wide-eyed, confused, trying to process what was happening. But I understood. I understood every word Callum said, each one cutting clean through the mask my family had worn for years. "Lara hasn't asked for anything," he continued. "She came here today for her family, for her son, and what she got in return was ridicule, laughter. She was served up as dinner entertainment." My throat tightened. I'd never wanted someone to speak for me. I was used to swallowing it all. Shame, sorrow, silence. But hearing those words spoken, finally, in front of hundreds of people, I realized I had needed this far longer than I'd admitted. I squeezed Luca's hand tighter. He tilted his head up and whispered, "Is he protecting you, Mom?" I looked down and nodded gently. "Yes, baby, he is." And for the first time that evening, my tears came. Not from humiliation, but from the staggering realization that someone saw me, understood me, and dared to speak the truth when everyone else had chosen silence. Callum placed the microphone down. He didn't say another word. He walked away from the table, past Vivian without so much as a glance, and headed straight for the door. No rush, no turning back. The room was utterly still. Luca and I stood there, surrounded by silence so heavy it felt like all sound had been sucked into a vacuum, leaving only the pounding of my heart echoing in my chest. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew, without a doubt, in that exact moment, the perfect mask my family had worn for years had finally begun to crack. And I, the woman who always stayed quiet, always bowed out, was still standing. Under the lights, in the ruin of it all, head unbowed. After Callum walked out of the hall, a strange emptiness settled in, as if the air itself had frozen between two heartbeats. The music had stopped. The laughter vanished. Only silence remained, heavy as stone. I stood there, one arm wrapped around Luca's shoulders, my eyes fixed on the door Callum had just walked through. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to run after him, not to say thank you, but just to confirm that what had just happened was real. But my legs didn't move, maybe because after all these years, I'd grown used to standing still. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward me, not with scorn as before, but with confusion, shock, and silence. Vivian was still on stage, her face pale, all traces of the glowing bride now gone. She stared at the microphone in her hand as if it were some alien object fallen from another world. My mother, Judith, was the first to react. She shot to her feet, throwing her napkin onto the table. Her chair screeched violently as it scraped backward. "That man!" she snapped, her voice sharp and shrill. "How dare he humiliate my daughter in front of everyone like that? Ungrateful! Absolutely disgraceful!" No one responded. There was no applause. No chorus of agreement like there used to be. The power she once wielded, with her voice, her stare, her invisible grip on the family, collapsed in an instant, like a paper castle washed away by rain. I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel small. I just felt empty. I turned to Luca. He still clung to me, his eyes full of confusion. I bent down and whispered, "Let's go home, sweetheart." He nodded quietly. I took his hand and began walking out of the room where I had spent a lifetime shrinking into the corners. But this time was different. As I walked past the tables, the guests shifted aside, not out of disdain, but as if making space for someone who had stood up after being torn down. Some avoided eye contact, some opened their mouths to speak, but no words came out. I didn't blame them. I used to be like that too. Silent, because silence was easier than confrontation. In the hallway leading to the exit, I heard someone call my name. "Lara!" I turned. It was my grandfather, Norman, the silver-haired man who used to bounce me on his knee and read me fairy tales, who once called me his little lion. He wasn't the same anymore. His back slightly hunched, his steps slower, his voice shaky, but his eyes, they were still the same. And for the first time in a long while, he looked at me not with pity, but with regret. He came closer and gently took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling. "I should have spoken up a long time ago." I didn't reply. I only nodded, then turned away. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at myself for waiting so long for recognition from people who only knew how to be silent. But tonight, I no longer needed it. Luca and I walked out of the hall. The night air brushed against my skin, cool and real. We didn't speak on the way home. Only the steady sound of tires on pavement and the gentle tapping of Luca's fingers on the door handle. I drove like a sleepwalker, my mind blank, my heart strangely light, as if I had finally set down something I'd carried on my back for an entire lifetime, something so heavy I once believed I would never stand tall again. That night, when we got home, I took off my shoes, dropped my purse on the couch, and sat still for a very long time. Luca had already fallen asleep. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and stood watching his little face, still stained with dried tears. I whispered, "I'm sorry for letting you see all of that." But deep inside I knew he had also seen something else, something I hadn't planned to show him, that silence may feel safe, but sometimes standing up is what truly matters. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking in the middle. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. There was no alarm, no honking horns or hurried footsteps from the apartment upstairs. I simply opened my eyes and felt different. Not the loud kind of different, not excitement, not triumph, just light, strangely light. I sat up, pulled on the thin jacket hanging by the bedpost, and stepped into the living room. Luca was still asleep, arms wrapped tightly around his worn-out teddy bear. His face looked peaceful, as if nothing had happened the night before. I stood watching him for a long moment. Maybe for a child, things pass like early summer rainstorms, but for me, I walked into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. As the water boiled, I noticed the phone I had left on the table. 47 missed calls. From unfamiliar names. A few messages from unsaved numbers. You were so strong last night. I was at the wedding. Thank you for not staying silent. Women like you deserve to be seen. I didn't know who they were. Maybe friends of Callum, maybe distant guests. But each message felt like a quiet nod from strangers who somehow understood. I opened Facebook, something I rarely did. The first message I saw was from an old high school classmate. Callum went viral. Someone filmed his speech. Nearly 70,000 views already. I tapped the link. The screen lit up. There I was, standing in the middle of the crowd, face stunned, holding tightly to my son's hand. Then Callum's voice came through, steady, clear, unshaken, the same words from the night before. But this time, I wasn't just hearing them. I was feeling them. Each sentence tore through the silence that had haunted every family dinner, every hesitant phone call, every judgmental glance I'd endured my whole life. I scrolled down to the comments. He's one of the rare good ones. I cried. She deserved to be defended. For every single mom out there, you're not alone. I was a kid like that boy. Thank you for being his shield. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, both hands wrapped around the warm cup of tea, letting the silence fill the small kitchen. A few days later, Vivian deleted all photos from the wedding off social media. No explanation, no statements, just gone. I heard she and Callum officially called off the engagement. No drama, no press, just a ring returned and two people walking in opposite directions. My mother, Judith, called me once. I picked up, already knowing what she was going to say. You know, she began, her voice as cold as ever, you embarrassed this family in front of everyone. Instead of swallowing your pride, you blew it all up. People are laughing at us. I sat still, counted to 3 in my head. Then I replied as calmly as I could, I'm no longer the place where you get to dump your disappointment and anger. She went quiet for a beat. I didn't wait. I hung up. No anger, no fear, no regret. Just closure. Life didn't change much afterward. I still worked the morning shift at the cafe, still greeted regulars with just enough of a smile, still worked the hotel reception at night and reminded guests not to smoke in the rooms. Luca still went to school, still asked me endless questions about everything from math problems to why clouds don't fall from the sky. But something in the way I walked felt different. Straighter, lighter, like I'd finally shrugged off an oversized, soaking wet coat I had mistaken for my own skin for far too long. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need them to come back or to give me credit. All I needed was peace. And the most important thing was, I had found it. Not in my family's approval, but in the eyes of my son, every time he looked at me and said, I'm proud of you, Mom. It's been 6 months since the wedding that never happened. I didn't mark the day on a calendar. I didn't count. I wasn't waiting for any apologies. One day, as I was folding Luca's clothes, I realized I no longer thought about that night every time I looked in the mirror. There was no sting when I saw a wedding dress displayed in a department store window, no tightness in my chest when my mother's name lit up my phone screen. Everything had moved behind me, like an old chapter I'd finally chosen to close, not because it no longer mattered, but because I no longer needed to reread it. Vivian never called, never texted, no explanation, not even a token, I'm sorry. I suppose for her it was just a moment of embarrassment, a slip, nothing more. But for me, it was different. I had lived through it, with my skin, my silence, and the tears I'd swallowed down my throat. One autumn afternoon, I found a small bouquet left outside my door. No glossy wrapping, no ribbons, just wildflowers, field daisies, purple asters, a few sprigs of lavender, looking freshly picked from the side of the road. There was no card, just a scrap of paper tucked between the petals. To The Lioness. I didn't need to guess who sent it. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I simply placed the bouquet in an old glass jar, set it in the center of the dining table, and smiled when Luca asked, "Is that for you, Mom?" I nodded. Yes, from someone who knows how to see what truly matters. I didn't change jobs. I didn't move away. I didn't become some inspirational figure like a few people suggested after the video went viral. I remained Lara, the woman living in a 2-bedroom apartment, working 2 jobs to raise her son, and knowing exactly what every dollar she earned was worth. But something had changed. I no longer bowed my head. I no longer shrank when people talked about family. I no longer felt like the off-key note in a perfect symphony. I am my own song, one that doesn't need a choir to feel worthy. Luca changed too. He was growing slowly, gently, with a kind of quiet depth rare in 8-year-old boys. Sometimes, while playing superhero, he'd stand in the middle of the living room, holding a pen like a microphone, declaring, "No one gets to hurt good people. If they try, I'll say, no, not today." I'd be washing dishes, smiling through tears, not from sadness, but from the certainty that my son had seen the most important truth on that painful night. That courage doesn't always shout, and sometimes walking away in silence is its own declaration. One evening, while we were brushing our teeth, Luca looked at me through the mirror. "Do you still feel sad about what Aunt Vivian said?" he asked. I looked at him, chin dusted with toothpaste, wide, curious eyes, and smiled. "Not anymore. Because now I know what really matters." He nodded thoughtfully, then tilted his head and asked, "So, does that mean you won?" I paused. It wasn't the question itself that caught me off guard, but the way he asked it, gently, without expecting a clear-cut answer. And suddenly, I understood. Yes, I won. Not by clapping back, not by making anyone regret their choices, but by holding on to myself, by walking out of a room I no longer belonged in, with my head held high, my son's hand in mine, and my heart unburdened. If someone were to ask me, "Lara, don't you wish the ending had been better?" I'd say, I don't need a perfect ending. I just need the right one. And sometimes the right thing to do is to stop. At the right place, at the right time, and know you no longer need to endure. If you're still reading these words, chances are, somewhere within this story, you saw a piece of yourself. Maybe it was a gathering where you didn't really belong. Maybe it was a glance from someone you love that made you feel small, no matter how hard you tried. Maybe it was all the years you lived with kindness, patience, and sacrifice, only to be labeled a burden. I just want to tell you one thing, something it took me many years to say with confidence. You don't need anyone's permission to know you are worthy. You don't need to be invited to show up. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. And if someone tries to define you by your mistakes, your scars, or your absences, remember, they are not the only mirror in your life. I was once the woman sitting at the back table, avoiding eye contact, holding back tears while everyone else laughed. I've swallowed my voice, stayed silent, bit my tongue so hard I could taste the metal of restraint. Until one day, I realized, silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just a habit of those who've been hurt too many times. And you know what? We weren't born to carry the weight forever. We were born to stand tall, to love, to live, and to claim the right to say, "No, not today." If you're still sitting in a room where you must shrink to keep others comfortable, maybe it's time to rise. If you've ever cried in silence because no one bothered to listen, I hope you know someone is listening to you now. And if you've ever wondered whether you're strong enough, the answer is, you are. You've always been enough. You just forgot how to believe it. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic redemption, no tearful hug in the rain, no mother who changed, no sister who broke down and admitted she was wrong. But I walked out of that room, not in a dazzling gown, but holding my son's hand tightly, head held high. And I understood. Some battles are won not with weapons, but with dignity. If this story made you smile, shed a tear, or simply feel a little less alone, then I wrote it for you. Share it with someone who's been hurt, someone who's been cast aside, someone who's ever felt not good enough to be heard. Because here's the truth. Every time we tell our story with honesty, no matter how shaky, how raw, we push back the shadow of silence just a little more. Thank you for staying until the very end. You deserve to be seen with kindness. You deserve to be heard. And you, wherever you are not alone.